This is the Hagmann Report for today. It is Monday, June 16th, 2014, the day after Father's Day. I want to wish all the fathers out there just a happy belated Father's Day. Hope you had a great one. Grandfathers as well. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of just absolute incredible programming. I'm so excited for tonight, for the show tonight. Miss you guys over the weekend, really. I was on Dave Hodges' The Common Sense show last evening from 10 to midnight Eastern. Folks, we'll get a link and put that up on our website as soon as I get the link from Dave. I don't know if you heard it. It was just a great 2 hours. The 2 hours went by like in 2 minutes. It was just a fabulous show. Anyway, folks, you're listening to the only show, the Hagmann Report, where the news is presented to you in 3D. We've got some fun ideas, and I want to thank people who have sent me some fun ideas with the 3D glasses and what have you. Thank you. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, the fog of disinformation, misinformation, and bring you the news beyond and behind the news. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. That's the real time. You might think Greenwich Mean Time's are real time. No, it's the Eastern time. You can find us, how's that for hubris? Huh? You can find us on the internet at HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. From there, you can get our archives, you can get our live show, you can get everything. We're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. Tune us in at the Hagmann@HagmannReport.com. You got to spell it all out, even the word and, two N's on Hagmann, 1G. That's Hagmann, the Hagmann@HagmannReport.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for your belief, your trust in us as we walk through this virtual minefield of current events together. We're just so happy to have each and every one of you tune into us on a regular basis, tune into us deliberately. We're very glad to have you. We've got a fantastic lineup this week. Tonight, folks, buckle up, because Mr. Stuart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers, is coming on, and he's going to be sharing some very important information as we progress down the road in which we're progressing here domestically. Tomorrow, I believe Stan Dale will be back for Tuesdays with Stan. Wednesday, we've got V and W. No X, Y, or Z, just V and W. Yes, the Financial Insider and the Intelligence Insider together. And Thursday, we have a very special surprise for you Thursday. I'm not going to get into it. We have to confirm it. One of the two is confirmed, I believe. There's going to be two gentlemen joining us. One you know well, the other you know somewhat well. Very, very academic type of individual. But hopefully we can get that pulled off for Thursday. So it's good. It's really a bang-up week coming up. Of course, I worked my butt off all day Father's Day from morning to night. My fingers are bleeding from scheduling. My son did nothing, absolutely nothing for me.
I thought it was kind of funny that you were forced to work on Father's Day.
Well, I did, and you know what, folks, and the dads out there, you guys will appreciate this, right? Who pays for dinner? Shouldn't the kids take the dads out for Father's Day?
Hey, absolutely, but I was told no.
By who?
I'm
going to track that person down. Who told you no? The waitress?
No, your other half.
My wife did. That's right. No, my wife is very kind to me.
Well, we did have a nice dinner yesterday.
Yes. And here's the thing: unless we're on the road, we never go out to dinner. And when we're on the road, dinner consists of, a salad at Subway or something to that effect. But we had the family together, and it was a nice extended family, friends, and a couple of friends, and had a very nice dinner. So that was very nice on you've got to take a little bit of time. The walls of the palace could be crumbling down. You still have to take a moment. Just take a moment and enjoy family while we still can. Which reminds me, HomelandSecurityUS.com as well as CanadaFreePress.com. There, CanadaFreePress.com, you can leave comments and discuss the article. I've been working on an article now for, I don't know, must be like 6 weeks, or it seems that way. When you've got this, when you're trying to say something and you want to say it correctly and properly. And finally, this morning, about 5 o'clock this morning, I was just sitting here. I'm thinking, I'm just so tired of looking at the same words over and over. And I got to finish this. I just have to finish this article. It was beyond. It was longer than what I wanted it to be, with more links than I wanted. It didn't really want to take you back in time to read articles, but I think it's important for you to take a look at the articles. And what I'd ask everyone to do, and I think this is important for right now. There's a couple of things here, and then I'm going to turn over to Joe, and then we'll get Stuart Rhodes on. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, and again, we're going to be populating this website with information. I keep saying that, but it's really a time-consuming, all-out time-consuming. Having said that, if you hover your mouse over, just click on Investigative Reports. There you'll find the entire list of Benghazi, everything about Benghazi. That takes you into Syria. It takes you into the Middle East. It takes you into ISIS. It takes you into all that, the investigative reporting, going all the way back to the right after Benghazi happened. What we're seeing, folks, in right now in Iraq, if you look at the photographs of the Toyota Tundras, if you look at the photographs of the materials, the assets, the military equipment being used, it's American equipment. It's not Russian equipment. It wasn't brought there by Russia. It wasn't brought there by China. It's American equipment. We left it there. Kerry, as I had said many times before, Kerry gave ISIS, and ISIS should not be lost on anyone, the acronym ISIS, given the fact that it's the Egyptian goddess. And they're trying to change it to ISIL, but having said that, it should be lost on no one. But the fact is, this has always been and will continue to be a fight for not just Baghdad, but for Syria. This is the southeast front into Syria. Don't be fooled, and this is a proxy war against Russia or a proxy war between the United States and Russia. This is the Saudi Arabian-backed initiative. When Obama bowed to the King of Saudi Arabia, he showed us his hind quarters, and that's what we're getting right now. That's what the vets have been getting. That's what we're getting, and of course, that is what Iraq, the Christians in Iraq are getting, and of course the soon-to-be Christians in Syria, well, they're getting that as well. And when Syria does happen, and it will, with ISIS and the anti-Assad rebels, it's going to explode and include taking the dollar with it. And Stuart Rhodes is going to come on here shortly, and we're going to be talking about the domestic aspect of things, how all this ties together. Folks, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, go ahead and share that little blip, if you can, please, if you don't mind, share the article on your social networking page. I think it gives people kind of a good idea as to what's really taking place. Some say I've stopped writing articles prolifically. Well, no, that's not true. I'm engaged in a lot of investigative projects that right now that are just really, you sit down at your desk at 7 in the morning, and all of a sudden you look up, it's 11:30 in the morning, and it's like, what happened to the morning? Because of the depth, the amount of research that's taking place. We're going to be publishing a lot of that research. Now, I don't want to get Breitbarted. Breitbarted is a verb. Google is not. But nonetheless, I'm not worried about that. I I just believe that we've got a lot to say about different things. So this week as well, or perhaps on the 30th, a week from today, I didn't tell Joe this. He got to the studio rather late. I didn't have a chance to talk to him about this. Possibly on the 30th, maybe. Let's see. This is the 16th. Either on the 23rd or the 30th. I'm not sure which. We're going to have a day dedicated to call-ins from law enforcement personnel, active law enforcement personnel. I'd like to do that. Those law enforcement personnel who are on our side for kind of a situational update, what they're going to do, how they're going to respond, what they're seeing, kind of a dedicated law enforcement call-in type program, and we would vet the callers in a particular fashion that we're not going to disclose, but I think it would be a good thing. And that was mentioned by our sponsors, American Survival Wholesale, among others. So it's kind of a good thing. So we're looking at that. We're looking at different possibilities here. So having said all of that, Joe, welcome to today.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Let's call Stuart Rhodes and get him on.
Yeah, let's do that. A lot of news, by the way. While Joe's dialing that number, just a lot of news here. The invasion, the illegal immigrant invasion. It's just incredible. By the way, Cuban, and we're going to call live here, so I'll just stop talking and wait until he answers. Remember laughing, one ringy dingy?
Hello.
Hey, Mr. Rhodes. This is Doug Hagmann and Joe Hagmann. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Fantastic. Very, very big fan of yours, Mr. Rhodes. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome Mr. Stuart Rhodes. He's a constitutional attorney. He's the founder of the Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current and formerly serving military, police, and first responders who pledge to fulfill the oath all military and police take to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The oath, mandated by Article 6 of the Constitution itself, is to the Constitution, folks, not to politicians, not to people, not to presidents, not to elected officials. And Oath Keepers, they declare that they will not obey unconstitutional orders. For example, taking your firearms away from you. You're an Oath Keeper? No. Real quick, Mr. Rhodes, before we get really into it, I got to tell you a story. We had an election here last year for the county sheriff, and I was in a store where one of the hopefuls had no experience at all in law enforcement, and it's a political position, of course. And I looked at him, or he offered me a T-shirt, and I said, "No, that's fine. I'd much rather know about your beliefs." The first question out of my mouth was, "Are you an Oath Keeper?" And he looked at me and said, "What's that?" And I said, "Have a nice day."
Well, I really don't care if someone joins the organization. That's not the point. The point is will they keep their oath? And so I guess the better question would be what was your oath to? And then how would you keep it when you are sheriff? Would be the question I would ask someone like that.
That's a good point.
See if they even know that their oath is to the Constitution. A lot of them will say, well, my oath is to, defend the people against criminals or enforce the law. That's when you got somebody who's ignorant.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, Mr. Rhodes, it's good to have you on. This is the first time that you're on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Your website is oathkeepers.org. And, sir, if you don't mind, let's start out by, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your organization, so people who haven't heard about you, and I can't believe that listeners of this broadcast haven't, but for those who haven't, get to know you a little bit better and a little bit more about your organization.
Well, I guess probably the most important thing, I think, to me is I first took my oath back when I was 18, when I joined the Army, and I served as a paratrooper in the U.S. Army. So to me, that's much more important than taking an oath as a lawyer. I think most lawyers are oath breakers. So I'm much more proud of my oath when I was 18 years old. So I worked for Congressman Ron Paul on his D.C. staff after I got out of college. And then while I was on the staff, we sat around and said, well, the bad guys use Ivy League educations as kind of a scepter of power to and appeal to authority. So why don't we send some guys to Ivy League education, to Ivy League schools as well? And so I did. I targeted all the Ivy League schools and got into Yale Law School and went to law school there. So, I think it's good for us to send our people into the institutions that the other side uses, as like I said, as a kind of scepter of authority. And so that's what I did as I became an attorney. But I definitely it's too late. It was too late for them to brainwash me into their agenda, which is basically just power. And what I saw there kind of reminded me of that movie, The Devil's Advocate, where you can just feel the evil oozing off the walls, basically. And they would brag about how influential that one square block at the Yale Law School is in the world, and they're right. So I always felt like a token Westerner and the token, kind of like Neanderthal that they bring in just so they have more influence out west. So I was from Nevada. But anyway, after that I worked for Congressman Ron Paul and his D.C. staff, and it was after I had graduated from Yale Law School and after 9/11 that I saw what was being done to our country and the parallels to what had been done in Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia with the destruction of the normal legal system and the creation of a special track for political opponents of the regime. And the Nazis did much the same thing. They called them people's courts. They would have a special courts crammed with Nazi judges who would rule in favor of the party and against the defendant under any circumstance, and they were just railroaded through. And this is the same thing we're seeing being done here. And what really got me concerned enough to start Oath Keepers was the detention of Jose Padilla, a U.S. citizen, way back in 2002, I think it was. He was detained in Chicago at O'Hare International Airport, and instead of getting a grand jury indictment and then charging him with terrorism or charging him with a crime and trying him from the jury of his peers, they just took him to a military brig and held him for 3 years. This is a U.S. citizen. And they did it to another U.S. citizen, Yasser Hamdi, and so that there were 2 U.S. citizens who were detained without a grand jury indictment or a jury trial, as the Constitution requires, instead characterized as the enemy in wartime. And so this is the beginning of the second track in modern American history, much like what was done to the Japanese Americans during World War II. Same kind of logic. These are the enemy, and directly flew in the face of the treason clause of Article 3, Section 3 in the Constitution to mandate a jury trial and extra procedural protections of 2 witnesses to the same overt act of treason or confession in open court. And so this is exactly counter to the founders' intent and is repeating what King George had done. Among the charges against the king in Declaration was denial of jury trial and treating the American people like an enemy in wartime. And so our government has come full circle and begun to behave in the same way that the King and Parliament had done during the time of the founders that compelled them to take up arms. That's where we are now. We are, I think, post-Constitution in many ways. The executive branch, the judiciary branch, and now Congress itself, the legislative branch with the NDAA of 2012, has already crossed the Rubicon. They've already stepped outside of the Constitution, and I've already put you in the same posture as an occupied enemy nation, claiming the same powers over you, the American people, as they claimed over the Japanese or the Germans when they were conquered, or Iraq and Afghanistan. So really they see you as being no different than some goat herder in Iraq or Afghanistan as far as what they can do to you. And so that's why it was no surprise to me that there was a recent revelation of this DOD memo that said that the Department of Defense had authorized lower-level commanders to use their own discretion to decide when they would use military force against American citizens. They are already transplanting. They've already done it legally. The legal posture is now the same as if you were Iraqis, and they're already starting to transplant the lower-level discretion in the minds of the commanders to use military force here at home. So that's coming. Whatever has been done in Iraq and Afghanistan is going to be done here.
That's a frightening thought, and I'll make an admission and my audience our audience knows this. Jose Padilla and others. I cheered. I actually cheered. Go get them. Yeah, you send them to Guantanamo. And I was the biggest. I guess the only. I guess one would call me a neocon in many respects at the time. And then, at some point you begin to start to think, wait a minute, what are we doing here? How are we doing this? It doesn't make much sense. And then when you start, maturing intellectually, there's an intellectual maturing process that I think some people have to go through, like me. Others much smarter than me don't have to. They're already there. They understand that, hey, wait a minute, this is not constitutional. This is antithetical to the founding or to the structure of our laws. But I had to go through that process. I was a flag waver. I was a cheerleader for the bombs, bullets, and Guantanamo. That whole mindset until I realized, wait, there's a lot wrong with this, and do you still find people in that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's kind of why I found Oath Keepers. I knew that's how they do it. They always do it by presenting you with a indefensible, detestable foreign enemy. In our case, it's Al Qaeda, and saying, look, to get these bad guys don't deserve a trial. Oh no, of course not. They should just be executed, and then get you to cheer what you think should be done to people you consider to be, pieces of crap. But what they're not telling you is you're creating the legal precedent for the exact same thing to be done to you and your family. And that's what they do. They create the precedent with your full-throated support, and they put the precedent into judicial decisions, into executive actions, and then they codify it into law, which we have now in the NDA 2012, and all its predecessors, all of its antecedents since then. They put that into place legally, just like the Nazis did. Everything they did was, quote-unquote legal. And then they use it against everyone in the broader population. And of course, they demonize you as they do it, but it goes way beyond Al Qaeda, As you were saying, all of the power they put, all the infrastructure, the surveillance, DHS, Northcom, domestic troops, all of that they put in place to fight Al Qaeda, or so they said, is now being swung inward on us. And who's the target? It's veterans, it's constitutionalists, it's homeschoolers, it's gun owners. We all know who the target is. That's how they've done it. So there's still, though, quite a few Americans who don't see it. They just don't see it. And a lot of them are still in uniform. And so our big mission is two-pronged. One, to the current serving military and police, to wake them up to what's being done and how they are going to be used as cannon fodder against their fellow Americans. Two, to wake up all the veterans to their duty and responsibility to get their communities squared away now, because we know an economic collapse is coming. That'll be the other shoe that drops. That'll be what they'll use as their great emergency to justify applying all of these new powers and new infrastructure to you. You create an emergency here, like an economic 9/11, an economic, picture an economic Katrina, nationwide version of what you saw in Katrina. With the excuse of an emergency, they'll do the same thing across the country that they did in Katrina. Trying to seize firearms, suspending basic rights, summary executions, all of that. And we just got a taste of that at the Bundy Ranch. You had military snipers deployed against U.S. citizens. That was the big reason why so many Americans responded the way they did and went down there. It was two big reasons. One, the utilization of military snipers, the posture of a military campaign against the Bundy family. And the second big reason is the gross violation of the First Amendment with these free speech zones. Those are the two things that pissed off most of the veterans who responded. Not the land issue. That was kind of secondary. For them, what the big one is, here we go again. It's going to be another Waco. So they're deploying snipers, and so what happened is, when you deploy snipers against your own people, it invites, counter snipers, and that's who showed up. We had U.S. Marine Corps scout snipers. We had MARSOC, well-trained Special Warfare Marines that deployed back there. There were Army Rangers who just gotten out recently, some Navy SEALs who had just recently gotten out. They all showed up as a counterforce to what they knew was on the other side. And what was on the other side is what they'd already seen in Afghanistan and Iraq, contractors. That's what it was.
Military contractors is what you're saying.
Right.
They were the ones that were snipers or holding sniper positions against. Well, okay. First of all, let me clarify something. You were at the Bundy Ranch, correct? You personally?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
I showed up. I got there. I missed the initial confrontation. We were stuck in traffic on the way there, but there were Oath Keepers there present who were on the ground, and then we were there from there on out afterwards. Yeah,
and you did a very, very nice, explanation. I guess that's the best way I know how to describe it. About I know that there were different groups represented and present at the ranch, and there were some people that seemed to be inserted or there that really were causing security issues, and you know, you had come up and did a press conference, if you will, or a conference, video conference, and explained the reasons, you know, why, or explained, number one, what was going on, which I thought was refreshing, and number two, explained because you were under criticism for leaving or for not leaving, but repositioning, I suppose. Things got out of hand there a little bit, as one would expect. But I just want to tell you that I watched the video conference you did, and I thought you did a fantastic job explaining everything and why you did what you did. But Mr. Rhodes, we've got you had sent a couple of different talking points, and I think you had mentioned a couple of different talking points, and I just, since we're on the topic of the Bundy Ranch, we could stay there. I know that you wanted to get into the recently released Department of Defense memo, the revelation of the Obama administration was in fact contemplating a military strike on the Bundy Ranch, or enemy combatant status, and application of laws of war to Americans here in the U.S., and also the coming economic collapse and what we all need to do to get ready. So, since we're on the subject of the Bundy Ranch, do you want to stay there, or do you want to?
Well, I think it's related. I mean, it was much like the powder alarm of our day. The powder alarms were in the Founders' Day, were the lead up to April 19th, 1775, where they had some pretty close calls. They were kind of a cat and mouse game, trying to seize powder and arms, either for the Patriot side or for the Loyalists, and so they came close to blows several times. And I think this was much like that. You had a situation where if there had been one negligent discharge in the crowd or one person jumped a gun, it could have erupted into a pretty savage firefight. And so I think it was close. I mean, it's just kind of an accident of history that it didn't. So, but I think it was necessary. I think it was a refreshing and necessary stand-up by the American people, saying, you're not going to treat us, this is not going to go down like it did in Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia, where, you know, it turned into a police state with barely a whimper from the people. It's not going to go down like that here. And I think that the people who showed up there proved that. Like I said, and one big point I made, there was a sniper, trained sniper up here in Montana who I happened to talk to about Bundy Ranch, and he said, well, he's a Special Forces veteran, and he said, well, I have teammates who are down there. I said, yeah, I know, and let your teammates know that there were, you know, Marine Corps scout snipers on the other side and other very well-trained people. This is not going to go down like it did at Waco, where you had, you know, militarily trained operators on the government side against untrained churchgoers. This is not like that. It's going to be sheepdog on sheepdog. And I think that's an important message for the people on the other side, whether they're knowing enemies of the Constitution or just people who work for the government in whatever capacity. They need to understand that the powers that be are setting them up to be the cannon fodder in a war against not just untrained civilians, but also against their brothers.
This might sound like an uninformed question, but I had heard this. The positioning of the BLM snipers, whether they were agents of or contractors for the BLM. The positioning was less than adequate. Is that an accurate statement? I mean, were they
well?
kind of in low-lying areas?
I think it is, because what happened is that the Bundy family and the Cowboys, they jumped inside of their OODA loop. They really did. You know, their observe, orientate, decide, and act response loop. They did not expect them to go to the place where the BLM was holding the cattle. That caught them off guard. And so I think they jumped inside of their reactionary response time, and they took the high ground. They were on the high ground. There was the freeway itself, and you had guys ensconced behind concrete barricades, and, you know, that's the high ground at that moment. So I think for that confrontation that happened in that wash, I think that's accurate. They were caught with their pants down. We're not expecting that. And there were people, and they were very serious people. There was one MARSOC Marine who had 300 kills in Afghanistan with a sniper rifle. He was on our side. So they had some serious people against them.
So just to give the audience listening a kind of a mental image, I mean, you had on one side the government snipers, shall we say, with the rifles with scopes, and on the other side you had equally, if not better, trained snipers with scopes, each having each other in their scope and their sights.
Right. And neither one of them now in necessarily the place they thought they were going to be. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, rather than being at the Bundy Ranch, it's now in that wash at the BLM compound. And
wow.
I don't have all full information about what they had prepared for their defense, but I think that, like I said, did not think that they saw that as a possibility, and they did not prepare for it well enough. And so, yeah, you had people moving into position on those sides, having to move. And I think that kind of equalized things quite a bit. So it's a good thing. I'm glad nothing happened. It's a good thing it didn't, you know. And no sane person that I know of wished to see bloodshed there. But I think it was important for them to get the message that, look, guys, it's not the old rules. This is not Waco rules. If you deploy military force and tactics against the American people, you're going to get a military response. And this is what I'm so concerned about, this DOD memo going out. It was no surprise to me. I've seen this build up for years. You know, the militarization of our police that coincides with the increasing use of the military domestically and plans to do so. But what's scary about this is it gives broad discretion to any military commander to deploy on his own decision military force against Americans on the request of any civilian official. It could be your local police chief. It could be some FBI agent. Who knows? And you look at it. It says in instances where the locals can request it, or it can be requested by a Fed, where the locals refuse or fail to adequately protect federal interests, is what it says. So they're contemplating nullification. So in a situation where a good constitutional sheriff, for example, refuses to aid or assist the feds, BLM, for example, coming in and running roughshod over you, in those instances, the BLM can turn to the local military base commander and request his assistance, up to including anything other than armed drones. An armed drone would require the president's authorization. You know, they left that off the table. But everything else, an Apache strike, you know, little birds, you name it, they could use it.
Wow.
Tanks, whatever.
Wow.
And you look at it, it says in instances where there's a confrontation with the local police or any law enforcement and groups or individuals. So that's a pretty low threshold, you know. So it's wide open now. But here's the thing, is the first time, I believe, the first time they do that, the reaction is going to be, imagine what would have happened at Bundy Ranch if they'd opened fire. Or imagine if they'd come in with a military strike and used Apaches, for example. What would have been the response? What do you think?
Well, certainly there would have been fire returned, but I mean, are you talking about response?
I mean nationwide. I mean, not just
nationwide. Oh, game on. at that point, game on. I think that
right.
there, I think there are people waiting for something like this to happen, and what scares me, there are people wanting it to happen. And as you had pointed out, no sane person is going to want a face-off like this or engaging in a firefight. To me, anyway. But yeah, I would suspect that it would be game on all across the United States. Have you kind of I don't want to say gamed for that, but kind of ran through that scenario? What would have happened in your estimation? What would have happened if that did happen at the Bundy Ranch?
If they had used, if there had been a firefight that day, I think it would have been game on, just from that alone. But if they had used like an Apache strike or a drone strike or any other mechanism of military force, I think it would have been the beginning of a civil war in the United States.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that you would have seen very quickly, much like in a civil war, the choosing of sides, and within units, within branches. So,
my goodness, within yes, I mean the Civil War redux, but much more vicious with and I think the fuse would be a lot shorter. Being a student of history, I mean, my goodness. Now, one thing I didn't know, or I was told, I believe it was on that Saturday. I have to go back through my notes, and I got a rather urgent call from a source I've got within the Beltway, who said, "Look, there's serious discussion about using military force against the they called them protesters. They called you protesters."
What day was that?
I believe that was that. Again, I have to go back and look through my notes, but it was the same day that I wrote up the article. I can tell you here in just a moment. It was the same day I wrote up the article about the situation that was unfolding at the ranch. That was on. I'll tell you in just a sec.
So the 12th was the confrontation in the wash. I believe it was a few days prior to that they had the incident which went viral, where Aaron Bundy was knocked to the ground, or tased, and his aunt was knocked to the ground.
Okay.
I think that was
okay. This was on. Here we go. I'm sorry. I have so many notes here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll sing to you while we're waiting for this. In fact, this was. I'm working at it here, Mr. Rhodes. I am.
I think it was the 8th was the tasing incident on Tuesday the 8th of April, and that's when also people learned about these the so-called first amendment zones, and that's when we first learned about the deployment of military trained snipers, and that's what galvanized a lot of guys just to jump in their truck.
Okay, this is on the 12th.
Yeah, and the 12th was the actual confrontation down in the wash. So, okay. There were guys who were not affiliated with any group. They just jumped in their truck. They just grabbed their rifles and jumped in their pickup trucks and went down. So I thought that was what was really most telling to me. Was not the response from organized groups, but the response from average Joes.
Well, and that takes a lot of courage, regardless of what anyone says. That takes a lot of courage to actually do what they did. And but okay, the information I had received at 1750 Eastern Time on the 12th of April was the fact that earlier and this is after everyone says, well, everything's been resolved. I had spoken to my source who said, wait a minute, a military assessment of satellite and drone surveillance imagery of patriotic resistance was actually crafted the previous day. It was actually in progress, but the potential for drones under the control of U.S. military, Predator-type drones, or drones to use payload deliveries, were being discussed on Friday the 11th. I don't know whether you heard anything about that. Real-time communication intercepts. They had real-time communication intercepts between.
Yeah, we presume that. Yeah, and we presumed we were under surveillance, aerial surveillance.
Yeah,
yeah.
And they were monitoring. Yeah, exactly. They were monitoring all internet traffic, all cell traffic, all communications traffic, and the monitoring of real-time video from the scene by surveillance drones and other means. And this source told me that, look, they expected the response, but they did not expect what they saw and met. So,
yeah, I think that's accurate. Like I said, I think to the credit of the Cowboys, it was their plan to saddle up and ride down there. I think it caught them off guard, and then the response from the people who supported them. Like I said, it wasn't just Cowboys and average Joes. It was also quite a few very well trained veterans who showed up, and a lot of it was just like a pickup game. They just showed up. In fact, one story was kind of interesting. Brandon Rapola is a Marine vet from Oregon and drove down by himself, and when he ran into some other Marine veterans there, one of them was this MARSOC Marine I was talking about. I think he goes by the name something like Joe Hollywood, but he had like 300 kills in Afghanistan, and when Brandon found out who was in the back of his truck, the guys jumped in his truck, he handed him his 338 Lapua sniper rifle and said, here, this is for you. So this is how they wound up with a MARSOC trained counter sniper on our side, just like a pickup game. He just grabbed that rifle and off he went. And so if things would have gone hot, that's a guy that is no joke. So
believe me, I'd be handing the rifle to him, saying, "Here, you do it."
Right, he's the right one to have the rifle in his hand. So this is the sick thing about it, and this is what I told this SF sniper. I said, "Look," he says, "Like, well, how can I help?" I said, "Well, the best thing you can do is to give the message to your former teammates that this is going to be sheepdog on sheepdog violence if they don't respect people's rights. It's not going to be like at Waco with you guys just gunning down women and children and untrained men. This is going to be warrior against warrior. So, take a step back and chill out and let us protest peacefully and don't make this into a military incident." And this is the problem, is that, the bad guys who control our government are never going to acknowledge their own fault. They're never going to say, well, the reason why we got that response is because we went in so heavy-handed with an overt military presence and threat. They're never going to admit that. So they're going to say, oh, no, it's because they're racist or because they're crazy, because they're extremists, and so they're never going to learn that lesson. And so it's really up to the rank and file to understand the message that, guys, you cannot turn this into Iraq and Afghanistan, because if you do, you're going to get the same response. You will make, like, I got an old retired Marine combat vet from Vietnam who's visiting me right now. He's on my board of directors, Steve Holman. He was down there in Bundy Ranch, and we were just talking. He's like, you know what? He says, I lived long enough to become Charlie, is what he said. In my own country, I'm now going to be in the same posture as Charlie was in Vietnam. He said, what kind of screwed up world is this? Here's a guy who fought for his country, and now in his old age, he's looking at the very distinct possibility of becoming the guerrilla against his own government because they've stepped outside of the Constitution. So that's kind of where we are.
How in the world did we allow this to happen? And maybe that sounds like a rhetorical question, but seriously, how in the world?
Hard to see the internal enemy. So it's easy to see the external enemy. It's easy to see the Japanese as the enemy, and the Germans, and the Soviets, and the Vietnamese, etc. It's really hard to see the ones inside the gate, inside your own.
Wow. Well,
that's what it is.
As we were,
hard to see.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, you've got senators that are declaring the entirety of the American soil as a battlefield. My goodness.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham. Yeah.
Yeah. Do they understand the gravity of that statement? What they're saying because I really expect in fact I had the former source that worked for DHS tell me that you'll see soon the use of a drone strike here in the United States against, it might be on some desert road somewhere, but and they'll justify this as being an enemy combatant that was going to, on their way to do something, and of course they would use this as a beta test to condition the populace into thinking this is okay. So I
think they're misunderstanding that the mindset out there. It's what's going to happen. It's just like at Bundy Ranch. If they'd have done any kind of overt military strike against that ranch, it would have been on. And what that would look like is fourth generation guerrilla war. It wouldn't be guys lining up on the town green in the open to get predator zoned or wasted by 20mm cannons from an Apache. It would be guerrilla warfare. It would be assassinations. It would be the targeting of the command and control, and it might be from the inside. This is what they don't understand, is that when they open that door and they've thrown the Constitution out the window and told us all that they're going to treat us just like the Afghanis, then we're going to have nothing left to lose. And they're going to have veterans across the country who are going to have the mindset of, I'm not going to wait for them to come to me or come for me. I'm going to go get them. And when they say them, they're going to be targeting the guys at the top. So all these politicians and all of these bureaucrats, or even base commanders who think they're going to just, be safe under those circumstances are fooling themselves. They won't be, And I'm not advocating that, but this is what's coming.
Well, right now we have a real-time listener, and in fact, I just received this email as you were talking, and I want to get this question in because it's late in Rome, Italy. A listener, an expat named Anthony. Anthony, you might want to introduce yourself to Karen in Rome, but nonetheless, wants to know before he retires for the evening or the morning, I should say, whether you are considered. How does the government consider you in all of this? You, Stuart Rhodes, are you classified as an enemy of the state, if you will? And that I'm paraphrasing the question, but I think you know where I'm going with this. Are you looked upon as
I assume so. But frankly, in this environment, if you're not on their list, then you're not doing your job as a citizen.
You're saying that well. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I presume that. I don't, but it just goes back to duty again. That's just how I feel about it, and I know a lot of other people feel the same way. But I think what I think is true though is that they intentionally let us know that they were contemplating a military strike. That Washington Times reporter quotes an anonymous official, affirming that yes, they considered a military option at Bundy Ranch. I think the intent is to let that out there to scare people and chill their activities, make you afraid to associate, make you afraid to speak out. And I think the proper response is the exact opposite. Use that as fuel to go out there and step out, and organize. And I think a good analogy for people to look at is what's going on, or what happened in Michoacan, Mexico, where you have the local population being tyrannized by the drug cartel and also by corrupt police and the corrupt government, and they finally just had enough. And they organized in a very public way, basically organized a public militia, and they kicked the cartel's ass. But not only did they kick the cartel's butt, but they also, because they were so united together, now the Mexican government has to fear them too. It's not just an isolated family being oppressed by either private bad guys or public bad guys. It's now an entire community. And a lot of guys will say, well, if you do that, if you organize very publicly, then there's no way, they'll bring the U.S. military in. Well, that's what you want. You don't want them to be able to use a secret police against you, a dozen or 2 dozen armed ninjas coming in against one lone family. What you want is for them not to be able to do that, because your whole neighborhood, your whole community is united in mutual defense, and it forces them to then try to rely on the military. Now the mask comes all the way off, and you can see them from what they are. They lose legitimacy in the eyes of the people, and the guys in the military are not of the same mindset as the guys in those well-vetted hit squads. You know what I'm saying? You can always find a dozen or 2 dozen or 100 guys who be your contractors, your mercenaries, and go do your bidding. Trying to get the National Guard of the state to do it, or the U.S. Army, or the U.S. Marine Corps, different ballgame. So I want them to have to rely on our standing military, because I think that what they'll see, like I said, is a split in the ranks, at least a split. You might see the entire U.S. Marine Corps, for example, go to the Patriot side. I can see that happening. And this is an important point, I think. I was in the Army myself, but I got to give credit where credit's due. At Bundy Ranch, the Marines showed up. It was like 90% Marines out there. At least 90% of the veterans out there for the U.S. Oh, yeah. So I think that's an important point. So they can put that in their friggin' cigar and smoke it, in their pipe and smoke it.
Wow. So, okay. What exactly? I mean, all right. I believe that this situation with the Bundy Ranch in particular is not over. That they want that land. They want the compliance to a tyrannical type of situation. But
they also can't let this go. They've had their nose bloodied. They've got a black eye, so they don't want to let that go unpunished. So I think what they're probably going to do is raids on people who were there.
And that was going to be my next question. What do you think their response is going to be? So what you're saying is watch, or perhaps maybe select what, half a dozen leaders or people out there and conduct raids against them. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think what's most likely are the guys who were unfortunately either videotaped or photographed sighted in behind their rifles. I think those are the ones that are most vulnerable to being raided. So I think it's much more likely that someone like that than Sheriff Mack or I or anybody else who was there. So I think they're the most at risk. But I think what's entirely possible is if they do raid someone like that, then there are going to be veterans in particular who are going to be like, that's it, we're going to go get them. We're going to bust them out.
Okay, I was going to say, and then what? And then you just answered that.
I think that's very, very possible. That they're going to be like, hey, you know what? The only reason they were there is because you had your guys with rifles pointed at us, at these cowboys, at families, and so that's why they were there. So they were there doing the right thing, and you're not going to keep them. That's kind of, I think, it's what's very likely. They're going to have, a response like that. So what I worry about, though, is that they will anticipate that and prepare for it. So
okay. Wow. A very complex, still a complex situation, I take it.
Right.
And I guess I know how you feel to the extent, I really can't know how you feel, except I suspect that you feel that this obviously, number one, is not over. Number two, phase two is yet to come. The other shoe is yet to drop, and when that happens, you're going to have to deal with that.
And I think they're miscalculating that. I think they might think they can get away with that. And once again, the purpose would be to teach a lesson, make an example out of people, and then chill your speech. In their head, they're probably thinking, we'll catch this guy when he's all by himself, whoever he is. He was there. We're going to catch him and make an example out of him. But I think that they're miscalculating. I think that the reaction will be harder once again than they expected, and it could include breaking them out. I mean, back when that one Marine was being held in Virginia, Brandon Robb, you recall that, the Marine veteran who was being detained under a state statute for mental health just because of his Facebook posts?
Yeah, 26-year-old Marine.
Right.
He was interrogated, labeled, and
right.
put in
Well, he's being held in a mental ward against his will because of his free speech, because of things he said on Facebook they didn't like, and it was just obviously illegitimate and just a pretext. And fortunately, a judge overturned it and let him go. But before that happened, I heard discussions among Marine veterans more than from different places across the country who were contemplating going down there and busting him out. I mean, they were very serious about it. They were going to go down there and get him out. So this is where we're at. People are just not going to sit back and take it. This is the message for them, is they need to understand that. And what they're going to have to do, if they're going to avoid bloodshed, is to respect the Constitution and respect our basic rights. Because if they don't, eventually it's going to lead to a situation that they think they can get away with, but they're going to miscalculate. And they're going to go too far, and that's going to be it. And it's going to spark it. You know? So that's kind of where we're at.
I think you're right, Mr. Rhodes. And to speak to what Mr. Rob went through, there's a study from the Rutherford Institute talking about Operation Vigilant Eagle and how the government and the Obama administration has ramped up the silence of dissidents, especially those with military backgrounds. And they, under the new, the DSM-5, the mental health.
Right, yeah.
DSM-4, DSM-5, they have this new oppositional defiance disorder definition, where is what they used with this Brandon Robb. Apparently, it says that they exhibit symptoms of questioning authority, refusing to follow directions. Basically, if you're ruffling feathers and not going with what the government says. But from the Rutherford Institute, this is from today, they talk about how this is going to increase, and people will be placed in, and people are being put in mental institutions for their Facebook posts or any type of opposition to Obama. And John Whitehead was interviewed on RT, and he's the constitutional attorney who is representing these cases. And they're saying there's a big increase of this coming still yet. And you see a standing of people such as yourself and other military and citizens out there that will stand up against this, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is once again, this is right out of Stalin's playbook and Hitler's. In both situations, in both Nazi Germany and Stalinist Russia, they used mental health determinations like this as one of their ways of targeting opponents of the regime. They can go full strength and put you in a gulag, like they did with, like dissidents like Solzhenitsyn, or they can just declare you mentally nuts and send you off to some nut house. So yes, they have the same intent here. The difference is this is not friggin' Germany or Russia, and they're not going to get the same response here. It's going to lead to people busting those people out and killing the guards who were holding them. This is what's going to happen, because this is a different country. So I think they should take the lesson of the Bundy Ranch to heart.
Anger has gotten to a boiling point here in America. One last question before the top of the hour break. This is from a listener in our interactive chat room. They ask, can you ask Mr. Rhodes if the sign-ups for Oath Keepers have increased since the Bundy Ranch?
Actually, we had a spike during our deployment there, and then we had a drop afterwards because we had people libel us and lie and tell people that we had run away, which was not true. So this is why we had to do that public video. We had already agreed that we would deploy out as scouts. We had a meeting earlier that day with Jerry DeLamas, and we did deploy out. And yet we had people who, him along with Ryan Payne and the rest of those guys in the public video, they libeled and slandered us. They told a lie. I've got combat vets who were with us, who were there out on patrol with us, and I think it's just disgusting to have someone attack the character of someone like that. So yeah, that kind of hurt us. And we also had folks who were afraid. We had two groups, but mainly who didn't like us after that. One group was some militia people who, thought we were too big for our britches or whatever. And then we had people who didn't like us stepping out and being that hardcore, who were afraid. And frankly, I don't care about either group. My target audience are the level-headed veterans who understand where we're at and are willing to do the hard work of preparing logistics in advance in each community. And we saw a lot of serious problems out there with lack of communications, lack of medical supplies, just lack of logistics. Guys show up with rifles but no radios and no friggin' medical ability to patch any holes. So a lot of things need to be worked on. So a lot of lessons learned out of that experience. But I think overall it was a positive experience. So
well, at least
I don't worry about that. I didn't start Oath Keepers for a popularity contest.
No, I understand that. But at least something positive did come out, and you are able to learn things in situations like that.
Yeah, a lot of lessons learned. Never again will I put my people under anybody else's command. Ever again. That will never happen again. They'll be under our own chain of command, period, and that's it.
And you know what? I agree with that. And let me be right up front with you, and I think our audience might remember we had an interview. We did conduct an interview with Jerry DeLamus. I think it was for an hour, maybe 45 minutes or an hour, and it was a very impassioned interview. And
he talks a good game. He's kind of like Glenn Beck. He'll cry on camera for you all the time.
Yeah, and this, as a matter of fact, he was on, and my goodness, our hearts went out to him. And then, as we had as time went on, and you had arrived, the Oath Keepers arrived, or you heading the Oath Keepers, I began to see, and folks, this was a learning experience for me. I began to see the role that Oath Keepers plays. You have the protocol set up. You're not going to be cannon fodder for federal agents. You're going to be doing sensible things. You're going to be now I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here. All I'm just saying is you operate by a certain standard, certain SOP, and you're no one's fool. You're not going to be.
I don't know. I got to differ with you on that. I made a lot of mistakes when I was there. But both the biggest mistake though was taking people on good faith and trusting that they had the best interests of the people around them in mind. And I really was naive. So I learned to take my lumps. Yeah.
But then again, I'm talking tactically now. You know your tactical operational skills. In other words, you're not going to have your men be out there as cannon fodder. So
no, I mean every commander has an absolute duty to make sure that his men's lives are not given cheaply. He needs to make sure that they're as expensive as can be, and that was not done. And I won't pull any punches on that. The defense out there was non-existent. Guys were not allowed to dig in like they should have. They were not allowed to deploy where they could have actually defended their family. I mean, they were about a mile away from the actual ranch. All it would have taken is the BLM could have just dropped a couple of vehicles across the road right above the camp, and they would have had to have run to the ranch to do anything. They wouldn't even have to have shot anybody. Just block the road and make them run across the desert. They would never have gotten there in time to help the family, and when they arrived, they'd have been all too wounded to do anything anyway. So it was a cluster of the first order. Yeah.
Wow.
A Platoon Sergeant Marine veteran who was there, Justin Giles, who's here with me now in Montana, he was there and tried to get them to move their operation closer to the Bundy family so they could actually protect them, and they did not take his advice. They took none of his advice.
See,
so he had experienced infantry NCOs trying to give advice, and they would not listen to.
And that's what I'm getting at, too. You can go out in a situation like that with the best of intentions. So if I went out there, I've never been in combat, I've never been in the military, I've never served in the military, so I am not going to be asked to be or be calling any shots anywhere. I'll be taking orders, not giving them. I know my limitations, and I know that there are people a whole lot smarter than me when it comes to operational tactics. So you've got to put egos aside. Put them aside. And
right. I'm the same way. I had with me Special Forces veterans, and like I said, some very experienced Marine infantry vets, combat vets, and a Ranger veteran. And those are the guys that I deferred to. They know more than I do. So, yeah, you're right. And like I said, the commander has a duty to make sure his men's lives are expensive. Look, when the founders fought at Bunker Hill, they didn't just show up there and act like they were on a Boy Scout camping trip. They dug in. They put a fence down at the bottom. They got ready and made it expensive, and that's why Nathaniel Greene, one of our generals, after the battle, said, "Give me 10 more Bunker Hills." Even though it was a quote unquote defeat, the British lost 1,700 men taking that friggin' hill.
Wow.
That was actually a victory, right? So even if you think you're going to die, make it expensive. Don't make it cheap. Don't just sit around in a lawn chair doing interviews waiting to get blown up. Make it expensive. So they go, holy Christ, we don't ever want to do that again. Make it like friggin' Iwo Jima for them. That's what you want it to be like. If they're going to come kill you, make it hard.
Make it difficult indeed. And
the Hagmann and Hagmann report on this Monday, June 16th, 2014, with our very special guest, Mr. Stuart Rhodes from oathkeepers.org. Mr. Rhodes, I'm going to jump in and just get the second hour going. In the first hour, you mentioned the militarization of the local police forces. And last week, I believe, there was a story talking about the amount of money being spent on different local police municipalities. There's one today about the Department of Homeland Security teaming up with local law enforcement. How can everyday citizens prepare for this huge increase in technology and artillery that they're seeing in their local police departments?
Well, actually, that's kind of a nice segue into the thing I wanted to mention, is that in response, after seeing what happened at Bundy Ranch, the increasing intent, clear intent to use military force against Americans, as confirmed by the DOD memo, we have decided to put out, we have Justin Giles, who is one of our Alaska leaders. He actually worked on the first Predator drones, and he worked on the FLIR, the forward-looking infrared systems for the Predators. And he had, while he was working on them, he developed a countersuit. He developed a way to hide from them. But he did not put it out because 9/11 hit. He was going to write a book about it for Paladin Press, and he held off on putting it out there. He didn't want it to fall into the hands of our enemies in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else. So he held back for 13 years on this capability. But now, clear intent to use military force against Americans, he's decided to put this out to the public. And so he's here now in Montana with me right now. We're filming a tutorial on how to build one of these suits. And it's not the conventional, simple mylar or tarps. It's something very different. So he's putting that together. We're going to put it out this next week, this weekend, or by Monday at the latest. It'll be out. Sadly, we are becoming like the Afghans or the Vietnamese. We have to worry about technology being used against us that we paid for. That's what's kind of sick about it. Is you've got advanced technology developed supposedly for foreign enemies now being turned against Americans. And so I think Americans need to take a hard lesson from our former enemies. Go learn techniques of the Viet Cong. I think a really good book to read, Soldier, by a guy's name is Poole. H. John Poole has a good book out called Phantom Soldier. It talks about the ways the Vietnamese and other enemies have countered superior American technology and air power. And so I think it's sad, but the reality where we are. And the same goes for your police militarizing. And the police officers out there need to understand that an MRAP is not going to make them safer. Militarizing like that is going to make them far less safe. The way to be safe is to respect the Constitution, to demilitarize and go back to being a peace officer, there to keep the peace, not just a law enforcer, and certainly not some kind of military occupying force. It's not going to be a safe place for them to be if they start treating Americans like they're in Iraq or Afghanistan. You've got a lot of returning war veterans, a lot of older veterans who know precisely how to counter any of that crap. So they're fooling themselves if they think they can just buy more military gear and be safer. The way to be safe is don't make war against your own people. So that's why we try to reach out to them as many as possible and say, look, guys, your children live here too. Your country it's our country and your country also. Don't destroy it from within. But having this idea in their head that they must militarize to be safe is not going to keep them safe and is not going to keep us free either. It's just going to destroy this country.
What's going on behind the scenes of what are you hearing that's going on behind the scenes of, well, the municipal police forces? You've got to be hearing things, or the state police or sheriff's departments. What's going on?
Where you're at. I would say overall, the rank and file. I would say that overall, the rank and file understands the situation we're in, and especially the rural parts of the country. Like out here in Montana and in the rural areas across the country, they're much more like-minded, and they're much more likely to be sympathetic, especially against stuff like gun control. Where they don't get it is in response to the drug war. A lot of them have kind of drunk the Kool-Aid on that. over the years, and they're still drug warriors, but they don't see the danger. They don't see that, yes, drugs are bad, and you know, who can argue that methamphetamine and heroin and things like that are dangerous and destructive. But they don't understand that that's the window through which the powers that be have militarized the police, and I think a lot of them are just now waking up to that fact. But the gun control is like they can get. So I think that one of the best ways you can approach a local police officer, rank and file, most of them tend to be pro-gun, is through that window and say, look, you know, here's one of our concerns is the obvious intent to disarm us. Look what's going on with veterans being disarmed for the most ridiculous things by the VA because they can't, you know, supposedly can't manage their own funds. They're being declared, you know, a person who cannot own firearms. And so a lot of police officers are sympathetic to that view. Down in Nevada, we have a lot of Metro who are oath keepers, and we talked to quite a few rank-and-file police officers there, both BLM and Las Vegas Metro, and Highway Patrol, and none of them wanted any part of that confrontation. So they understood that this was a whole different ballgame they were entering into, and they didn't want any part of it. And I think that, but the sad thing is that once again, they are seen as cannon fodder by the political elites in D.C. You know, useless dumb animals. They can be thrown into the fight against their fellow Americans, and that's kind of the point of all this militarization of the police, is to preposition supplies and use local police as a force multiplier. Much the same as was done in Germany with the Einsatzgruppen, you know, the reserve police officers who were used to go round up Jews and kill them. So I think the intent is the same here, is to preposition supplies across the country, including all those MRAPs, and use the local SWAT team as an infantry squad against you. But that only works when you are just, you know, mom and dad and the 4 kids in the house when they come in. If you actually prepare to fight them, it's not going to work. When veterans get together and prepare to encounter that stuff, it's not going to go down like that. It's going to be more like what happened at Bundy Ranch, you know. So I think
what's the criteria?
Across the country need to realize that. What's that?
What's the criteria? In other words, here I am, Doug Hagmann, you know, family, law-abiding citizen, normal guy. I mean, what's the criteria for getting swatted, shall we say? Although we've got to talk. Look what happened
to that Marine veteran down there, Jose Farina, in Tucson. What was the criteria there? 2 criteria. One, he was suspected to have been, you know, related to or involved in a drug trade, a drug cartel. That was the search warrant, was to go search his home for any relationship to drugs. But the second thing was he was a veteran. So look what they did, you know.
Oh, that's true.
It would have made sense. It would have made sense. He worked at a mine on graveyard shift, got off at 7 o'clock in the morning and went home. They could have gone to his work in the middle of, you know, like 6 o'clock in the morning when he was still at work, called him into the office, say, hey, Jose, have a seat. We're going to search your house while you sit here. That's what they should have done. That makes sense. If you think this guy's somehow a dangerous guy, you don't wait till he goes home. You stop him on the way home, or you detain him at work, and you go search the house. You know, but instead they wait for him to get off work, go get in bed, and then they raid his house. How does that make any sense? At the time, I had a Special Forces retired major on my board, Rex McTeer, and he said he had been in SF down at Fort Bragg when they first started training these SWAT teams back in the 70s. And he said he could tell back then this was not going to end well. These are guys who think they're high-speed, low-drag. They think they're Delta Force. But what do they wind up doing? They stack in front of the door. They stack in the fatal funnel. He said a real bad guy would have had an M60 in the garage on a tripod on a T&E, all dialed up, and would have swept across that friggin' wall and killed them all. If he was really hooked up with the cartel and a real bad guy, he'd have prepared his ground and killed them all. So those tactics only work against guys who are not real hardcore bad guys. See what I'm saying? So that was his message. That's what Rex's point was, is look, guys, you SWAT guys who want to go and raid, you're used to dealing with low-ranking street criminals and drug addicts. When you start doing this crap to veterans, at some point, they're going to have enough of this crap, and they're going to harden their homes, and they're going to prepare their ground. When you go try to do this to one of them, you're going to get wasted, you know? So, once again, militarizing is not going to make them safe. What would have made them safe is doing the rational thing and just detaining the guy on the way home with a traffic stop, or even better at work. Same thing with Bundy Ranch, you know. Why did we go down there? Because just like at Waco, remember that? David Koresh went for jogs all the time. The local sheriff, whenever he wanted to, could have just, you know, gone in there and done what he'd done before, do an inspection. They could have detained Koresh while he was out shopping or jogging or anything. But they waited until they knew everyone was home, did some dynamic military raid, because they get off on that crap. They get off on the testosterone, kicking in doors and being tough guys. So this is why, you know, we saw the same situation in Bundy Ranch. Is it going to be rational where they wait 6 months and maybe arrest Mr. Bundy at the feed store or on the way home from church or whatever? Or are they going to go Waco on him and try to do some kind of dynamic show of force? The intent expressed to us, with all these snipers being deployed, was that they were very much seriously considering going hardcore, you know, full Monty with a military-style raid. That's why we reacted the way we did, all of us veterans. So this is the problem. Police in this country have got to understand their responsibility. If they ratchet it up by acting like wannabe Delta Force, they're going to get real Delta Force or Rangers or Marine Corps veterans responding with the real shit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cuss. They're going to get real veterans responding with the real tactics who are going to counter that stuff. So they are not going to be safer. They're going to be more in more danger. But I worry that they'll never admit that. They'll never acknowledge it. You know?
At what point is this going to happen? I can see, you know, we can see the militarization, as Joe mentioned. We can see all this kind of posturing. But at what point, when is this going to take place? I mean, where, when?
It could be in New York. I mean, this is New York right now. Before Bundy Ranch popped up on our radar screen, New York was the one we were all worried about as kind of like the ticking time bomb. You have a governor of New York, Cuomo, who has already made it very clear that he intends to enforce the so-called SAFE Act. And you've got gun owners across New York by the thousands who have refused to comply and who have posted pictures of themselves in ghillie suits, you know, making it very clear they're not going to comply and making it very clear how they are not going to comply. And so this is a ticking time bomb. This is a collision course. You've got people who will not back up any longer, who will not comply, and you've got a governor who is dead set on forcing the issue. And he's going to throw his state police into a meat grinder at some point. So unless the courts grant a stay on the enforcement of the law, or unless these politicians pull their head out of their rear end and realize what they're doing, I think eventually it's going to be luck of the draw. They're going to go to the wrong house. They're going to go to some guy who's retired Special Forces. I got a leader up there, for example. He's retired New York PD. He's also retired Vietnam vet Special Forces. You go to his house to try to take his guns, it's not going to be a turkey shoot. He's not going to be just sitting there waiting to die, you know, in his easy chair. He's going to make it hard. And so that's what's going to happen to them. They're going to go to the wrong house, and it's going to be a horror show. Either a whole family gets wiped out or a whole SWAT team gets wiped out, something like that.
And then from there, it's going to be, as we said initially, game on.
This is the problem, though, is that they've taken stuff that they've become used to doing to when they're dealing with, like I said, drug dealers and low-level dirtbags, and now they're contemplating using the same old tactics against military veterans. It's just not going to work the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Rhodes, we've got a gentleman. He's by the name. He's known to us as W. I know him personally. He's in the intelligence world. He's lived this. He's gone through this. In fact, when the BLM situation was taking place, we had talked. He has experience in previous, shall we say, previous operations. He goes by the initial W. Normally, we do this rarely, but I'm going to bring him on. He's got a question, or he's got a statement that he'd like to address with you. And W, are you there?
I am, and I apologize for just elbowing in, but I just wanted to expand on one point that Mr. Rhodes was saying there, just because I was there during that history, and and it's so important to the message that you're presenting, Mr. Rhodes. Yeah, Waco, it wasn't just about these people wanting to, play with their toys and everything else. There was a budget issue, and they were looking to grandstand, as was also the case up at Ruby Ridge, and is probably almost certainly was the case out in Oklahoma. We were in an era where they were grandstanding so they could prove the need for their presence and further expansion of their missions. And that's what was being sought here, even I think, back at the Bundy Ranch and some of these other things. They were looking to, again, have some grandstanding event that would then be fodder for them to build upon with Congress and the people, why they needed to be even more ever-present and expansive in their operations. And what you did there, and what was trying to be done there, was to cause everybody to take a deep breath and de-escalate. And even what we're calling for right now is let's de-escalate. These police chiefs, these other persons, base commanders, etc., were the ones looking to de-escalate the situation. These people in positions of authority who are trying to manufacture and concoct circumstances and events that will create a standoff where there's no seeming alternative to a greater, more expansive use of force, where blood spilt. Once that blood spilt, it's going to change the equation very dramatically. Fortunately, it was a little scrape on the cheek at Bundy Ranch, but it could have been lives lost had somebody gotten their way. And that was why the presence of trained vets who showed up and just decided to be there and make a stand by their presence was so critical, because had they gotten a little more momentum and had not the right guys showed up, there very well could have been loss of life here. And that's what we're saying. Before it reaches that point, the Oath Keepers are taking their stand right now to try and prevent it reaching that point, but not afraid.
It wasn't just us. It was a lot of folks from a lot of different groups, and like I said, individuals.
Yes.
And I think that's actually more the message.
It's the principle.
Right.
It's the principle of being an Oath Keeper and taking that stand. I don't want to take away from what you're saying, and
no, I think you're right.
But I think that's an important point that needs to be held. So, great job.
No, you're right.
Job.
Spot on. Yeah, I agree.
All right.
I agree. I agree. The answer is to de-escalate. I would love nothing better than to hang up my spurs and not have to worry about my children living in a police state, that I see where it's going. And the answer is to de-escalate. Simply get back to being, like I said, being within the Constitution and not militarizing this society. Don't turn us into Iraq and Afghanistan, or we will act like the insurgency if we have to. That's what's going to happen. So, and it's not going to be the politicians, at least not at first, who bear the brunt of it. It's going to be the rank and file cops. They need to understand that. They really do.
Does that, the rank and file police that you talk to, I mean, and you say they understand that, are they willing to? I mean, what's their position? Is it one? Is it? I mean, I'm searching for the correct method of or way of asking the question. What do you expect the police to do? I mean, are they going to back down? Are they going to say no? We're not going to do this raid? Or I mean,
they should. I mean, they should. If they that would be the proper response. Hold on a second. I got to close this window. They should do that. But here's the problem: is that this is the problem with having, just like a standing army. The founders understood it was dangerous to liberty because you have people who are professionally, invested in being a soldier full time. They tend to be easier to get to go along with orders. That's just the way it is. That's why they wanted to rely on a militia for our domestic security. Part-time soldiers, citizen soldiers whose identity is not wrapped around just being a soldier. Well, the same is true for police officers. It's just human nature. If someone's entire identity is wrapped around being a police officer, and they're worried about their career and their pension and all that, they are more likely to go along with it. I'm not saying they will all do that. I know some who will not. But this is just the way it is. It's just human nature. So I think the message is going to have to be to them, look, it's not just your career at stake. It's not just whether or not you'll still be a police officer or whether or not you get your pension. What's also at stake is your life, and what's also at stake is your whole country. And that's what I prefer when I go talk to them is I say, look, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to try to get you to do the right thing because it's the right thing. But they need to understand that this is not going to be like the drug war. When they are part of the war against the veterans of this country, it's not going to go down like that. It's going to be, like I said, sheepdog on sheepdog, different kettle of fish, you know. So
exactly.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, the place where you're more likely to get the right response is by putting in a constitutional sheriff, because he doesn't answer to anybody but the people, and he's much more likely to be able to lead his men into doing the right thing and taking a stand. When you have police officers who don't have that shelter, who are, you know, at the mercy of the local town council, that's where you get police chiefs who tend to be historically more likely to go along with that kind of stuff because their jobs are at stake. So I don't know if you can get them to see beyond their own job is the question. Some you can, some you cannot. I'm not going to count on it. Let's put it that way. What I can count on, I believe, is that if the majority of the military knows what's right and wrong, I think they will do the right thing because they're not as invested in being, you know, that for the rest of their life. That's the one advantage of a, you know, part-time army, I guess you could call it. Guys who go in for 4 years, 8 years, get out, they're more likely to say no, you know, because they're not as invested. And you get a cop who's been on the force for 20 years and he's looking at retirement coming up, he's more likely to go along. So I'm just being honest with you. You know, this is the uphill battle we are fighting right now. There are some who will, at a certain point, say no. And that's the whole point of that Declaration of 10 Orders we issued when we first got Oath Keepers, is to try to get them to think in advance about where their line in the sand is. Where will they draw a hard line and be willing to step down and throw their badge on the desk and walk away? Or where will they be willing to intervene and maybe even arrest the other officer and stop them from abusing somebody? You know, sadly, we're not seeing enough of that. You know, I know they're good cops. And I know a lot of things they do don't go seen. You know, they go unseen. People just don't see it. But they have got to start standing up in a very public way, because if they don't, then what's going to happen is the people, and I'm talking about, you know, the salt of the earth, they're going to turn against them. They're going to turn against them. It's already happening now. You've already got quite a few Americans who see the YouTube videos of all the abuse. They see all this. And they're already in their head. It's like, you know, you're raised to think that all police officers are officer-friendly and good guys, but now it's more like you see a cop and they see them as the enemy. And police officers need to understand that. And so they have a duty and responsibility to police their own. If they don't police their own and start standing up, even at the expense of their career, to do the right thing, then they will be seen as an occupying enemy. And unlike the politicians who live in gated communities and have bodyguards and all that, these patrol officers are running around in marked cars. You know, look what happened in Las Vegas with that couple. You know, they're easy marks. So, and once again, I'm not condoning that. I'm just kind of like a warning to these guys. Like, look, guys, the more you start to treat everybody in society as a dirtbag, and the more you start to treat veterans in particular the same way you've been treating, you know, rank and file street criminals and drug addicts, the less safe you're going to be. So you need to really ratchet back and de-escalate, like your friend said. That's the answer.
And I think that your organization provides the platform, or the answers, or the instruction manual, or the way for police officers to say, to choose a side, or to be very public in their side that they have chosen. To me, has there been any backlash? I've got to ask that question. For example, I've got quite a few friends that are police officers in the small town in the township in which I live, and they're all pretty mellow guys. Two women, by the way. But having said that, it's a very small police force, very mellow. They're not out. They're not going to. In fact, I saw one yesterday assisting a motorist changing a tire. Okay,
right.
That's so the demographics it's a wide range of demographics. You're not going to see that in the Bronx. You're not going to see that in the borough, the 5 boroughs of New York City necessarily. Now, having said that,
I know some good cops out of New York. We got some pretty good Oath Keeper cops right out of New York, out of the Bronx. There's some good people there.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, yeah. Perhaps I shouldn't have said it that way, but I guess Oath Keepers. If you're a police officer, or if you're listening to this, I know we've got a lot of police officers that listen. A good way to really let the public know on which side you stand, and let your fellow officers know, would be to join the Oath Keepers. Isn't that?
You don't run around with an Oath Keeper tab on your uniform, though. That's the problem. I think the best way to do it is to be that cop in your community who changed the tires and goes door to door and meets the neighbors and they get to know you as a good guy. I think that's your greatest security, and have your head on a swivel, because there are people out there who are going to see, sadly, they're going to see all police officers as the enemy, and so be aware of that. But I think the best thing you can do is getting back to, I think the beat cop is the way to roll, get back to community policing. Get out of the MRAP, get out of the car and go walk the beat and go knock on the doors and introduce yourself to all the people in the neighborhood, and be the one that is respectful of people and helps, So,
I agree.
There are some, that's what I would do if I were a cop. I would make it a point to go out there in the community and keep the peace, not as a law enforcer. I'm not going to go out there to enforce every stupid law that some politician passes, some damn lawyer.
Yeah,
keep
really.
the peace. So
okay.
Got to get back to that, guys. Get back to community policing and walking the beat. I think that's the answer. As far as de-escalating and also making it clear which side you're on. And don't do checkpoints. Don't treat the American people like they're living in Nazi Germany. Treat them with respect. Go back to being the way it was in the 50s. So
exactly.
And then you're going to wind up with guys on your side. When you're dealing with a real bad guy, you want the community to respond to help you. You don't want them to look at you and go, well, hey, man, tough to be you,
Well, yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned checkpoints just now. How do you, Stuart Rhodes, handle checkpoints, or how do you suggest others, American citizens, law-abiding American citizens, handle checkpoints? I mean, that's one thing on
Don't
our
comply.
show that
I think the videos that are out there of guys who roll up and say, they say, "I'll pull over there," and it's like, nope, I don't think so. Am I under arrest? Am I being detained? What's your probable cause? What's your reasonable suspicion? What are you detaining me for? I think that's the better way to go. Call it for what it is. It's unconstitutional.
Gotcha.
And I don't care if some lawyer in a dress said it's okay. And this is the other thing. Once again, back to the drug war. I know cops who were cops back in the 1960s who back then, if you'd have told them that someday there'd be random checkpoints on American streets, they'd have laughed at you, as they told me. Like Dave Freeman, Las Vegas Metro, one of my founding board members of Oath Keepers, he said back then we'd have laughed you out of the coffee shop. He told us that we were going to be doing random checkpoints. He said, but over the years, look what's come up. Look what's come. It's like out of an old movie in 1940s in Nazi Germany, Papers, Please. That is what happens. Is through the drug war, they've conditioned the police and the people to think that that's okay, and it's not. It is not okay. That is not respectful of your Fourth Amendment rights or your human rights. They've got no business pulling you over in a random checkpoint and checking everybody, looking in everyone's vehicle, trying to see contraband or whatever. We're not all friggin' drug dealers. Don't treat us like that.
That's true. That's very true.
But also, that's why I live in Montana. And I tell you what, there are people who, for them, that's their tripwire. They've gone to places like Montana or Idaho or other rural areas to get away from that kind of stuff. And in their head, they're not going to let checkpoints operate in their area. Just you guys should know that. There are people out there who that's their trip line. Checkpoints to them, that's it. They're done. So.
Wow. Well,
and there,
I understand that.
If you're standing there in soft body armor at a checkpoint, you are not safe. Okay? It is not a safe activity in some places in this country. So, not a good idea.
Okay. All right. Now, Stuart, we had you had mentioned this, and this is something that we talk about on this program on a regular basis. Look, we know the economy is in a free fall. I don't want to say a free fall. I guess it's in the process of a collapse. It's the dollar is being killed off. It's an orchestrated collapse. There will be civil unrest. There will be riots. There will be things that will take place. And you had mentioned this as well in the run-up to this interview about what we all need to do to prepare. And I think people are looking right now. They're searching for answers. They're looking for people like yourself that have the experience, that have the finger on the pulse of law enforcement as well as the citizenry. What do we need to do to prepare for what's coming, whether it be the checkpoints, the violence? I'm just going
I think
go ahead.
The most important thing is to remove the pretext for like what we saw in Katrina. Because it was an emergency, or perceived as a serious emergency, because you have an unprepared population, it was much more likely, much easier to get police and military to go along with unconstitutional orders, like the orders to confiscate firearms during Katrina. So I think that it's critical for people now. And I know I've been hard on police on the show, and it might sound like I'm, anti-cop, but I think what's critical right now is for the people in the community to get to know the police, and the police get to know the people, and then start working together now. It's critical that you have neighborhood watches. I think ground zero, most important thing you can do is start a neighborhood watch, and then make sure it's not just, senior citizens with radios, but make sure it's also got some teeth to it and some defensive capability. And there's a good book out called The Failure of Civility that I recommend, written by two authors, Mike Garand and Jack Lawson, The Failure of Civility. One of them is Special Forces retired veteran. The other guy had worked in Rhodesia, helping to guard the farmers' farms in Rhodesia against the terrorists back in the 70s. And a lot of lessons learned from them about community defense. And so I think it's critical that people start taking responsibility for their community. I think the idea of isolated preppers, kind of a secret squirrel prepper who hides in his basement with all his food, that's just a fail. It's not going to work, That will not provide community security, will not save the Constitution, and it also won't even provide security for that family. If your perimeter is your four walls, you're toast. The looters, when they figure out you've got food, you're going to be, your food. They're going to get you, and they're going to take your food and kill you. So I think the answer is community defense, and the founders understood this. That's why they called the militia necessary for security of a free state. So we got to get back to that. And I think the best way to start is a neighborhood watch, and then things like organizing in your church for a mutual aid society in the church, including food storage. This is why Oath Keepers we call our CPT program, which stands for Community Preparedness Teams. And the whole goal is to lead by example within our organization, but also to go out into our community with the veterans as a training cadre to teach people, go and organize neighborhood watches, get the local VFW to become like the civil defense unit for the town, get people to start a reserve police department or posse or deputies, reserve deputies, any of those things that we can do to strengthen whatever is there and to eventually revitalize and restore the militia, town and county militias, not just, Billy Bob and his butt crack militia made up of him and his four buddies, but an actual town militia made up of all the able-bodied citizenry of a town and a county. That should be the goal. So, and I think the best way to start that road is to do a neighborhood watch. So I'd encourage everybody listening to make that their focus. And one big lesson out of Bundy Ranch, we saw lots of guys show up. Very few of them had radios. One of the first things I did when I landed there is I went out and bought 20 handheld, little MERS radios. and then we brought in another 20 cheap dual-band Bofang radios, ham radios. So you got to have comms, you got to have communications, and you got to have medical. And another big deficiency. You can improvise. Most guys got guns. You can improvise security. But if you don't have communications, you don't have medical, two huge gaps. So, and the other big thing I would say is food storage. You can't do any of these things if you die from starvation. So, a lot of guys have tons of ammunition but no food storage. And that's not going to work.
So, okay, because Gary J. from Geneva, Ohio, listening live, the very thing that we're talking about right now, asks, as you're taking questions, he has one regarding if things get really bad. And I think you covered this, but I just want to be sure here in the event that there's something here. If things get really bad and everything falls apart, especially for protecting our families against, we'll say, outside external forces, UN troops, for example. There's discussions about that. That would be enforcing some type of travel restrictions, martial law on our streets. If someone's got very limited funds, would his one larger price purchase be quality night vision or body armor? If you could only choose one, which one would it be? But I think you kind of answered that question. You don't need money to organize your own neighborhood watch.
I think community is the most I would say community is the most important thing you can do. Put the sweat equity into getting to know your neighbors and developing a team. I think that's why, like in our CPT program, we start with a 12-man team as our basic goal. But I tell guys, hey, first question for you is who's on your buddy team? Do you have another person that you train with and fire maneuver and know how to work together? And then who's on your fire team? That's 4 guys, 2 buddy teams. And do you have 4 people that you can rely on who train together and can do fire maneuver together? That's more important. I would say, rather than you buying a PVS-14 or some other night vision like that, or body armor, take the money and put it in training. Go down to Max Velocity's class down in West Virginia. Highly recommended. I think you're better off with a rusty old AK and a case of AK ammo and Max's class than you are with any high-speed, low-drag gear you can think of. Go learn how to do infantry fire maneuver, small unit tactics. Find someone that knows how to do that and learn from them, and then drill it. So that's most important. But yeah, I mean, if you've done all that and you've got your food storage and you've taken care of other essential things, and then I think night vision is pretty critical. I would pick night vision first. I did. That's the first thing I did is I went and spent $3,000 for a PVS-14 so I could see in the dark. That's critical. That's a game changer. And then after that, I would say handheld FLIR. One of these little like the Scout FLIR units for $2,500 if you can afford it, is also a game changer. You can see someone's heat signature out there in the woods. That's pretty critical. I would say number 3 would be body armor. Absolutely. At least a plate carrier and a set of plates, and which aren't that much money. You can get used ones for like $400 or $500 probably for a set for plates. That's pretty important. But most important though is that community, having a team and then training. So you're far more better off with one rifle and all that training under your belt than a whole bunch of a whole safe full of safe queens and no training.
Gotcha. I gotcha. And boy, are the questions are rolling in tonight from people who have heard of you. And
in fact, I recommend that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I recommend that Contact by Max Velocity. I would say number 1 read, frankly.
Is that off of your website? I mean, do you have that link to your website or?
No, I just go on Amazon. Look up Contact. It goes by the pen name Max. M-A-X Velocity. Okay. Right, and he does live training. This is a guy who is British para, also been joining the U.S. military. He's got a ton of field experience all over the world, and he's taken all that experience and put together what I think is the most squared away training you can get as a civilian.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Very good. I know Joe and I took some courses interesting courses, but certainly not to the extent I think you're talking.
Just light infantry tactics, just basic fire maneuver. How to work together so that you're always no one's moving unless someone's shooting, and providing covering fire. Just teaching you how to move together. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is what you need. Yeah.
Do you expect? And now this question is coming from me. We're talking like you're anticipating this taking place. I mean, you're talking like we're going to be living in a war zone here.
Well, I mean, the only way to avoid it, I always want to, the caveat is always take a look at East Germany. This is the one historic example I like to point to, where it looked like the communist regime, the bloody, bloodthirsty totalitarian regime, was never going to go away without a serious fight, right? But it collapsed, and it's a critical lesson for folks to go look at on our website. If you go to oathkeepers.org, off to the right is an interview I did with a guy named Gunther Spence, who was an East German lieutenant colonel, and he describes how before the wall fell, there were mass protests in the streets demanding unification with Germany, demanding an end to communism, and the regime had lost so much credibility that about 90% of the population was awake. And then the communist regime of East Germany gave orders to the army to crush the protests, and they refused.
Wow!
So you had the entire East German army stood down and stayed on base, and without the support of the army, the East German communist regime was done. So this is the possibility. That's I think the only peaceful resolution is if we attain that level of awareness in the population of the illegitimacy of what is being done to our Constitution, and also within the military. If you can get a mass stand down like that of the military, that's really our number one goal. That would be the game changer that could allow it to be corrected with very little bloodshed or no bloodshed, potentially, if they were to stand down like that. But I don't think we're there. And I know I interviewed Gunther and asked him the same question. I said, compared to East Germany, what do you think the level of awareness is among the American people? He said, maybe half, maybe 40%, maybe 30%. He said, so we're actually worse off than the East Germans were. They were, by the time the wall fell, they were already, wide awake about the illegitimacy of the regime they lived in. They could look at West Germany right next door. They had relatives over there. They could watch TV and listen to the radio. They could see what freedom was like, and they could see it clearly, and they could understand how illegitimate the communist regime had become. And so, unfortunately, in America, because of the divide of left and right and the games that are played against us, all the psyops, most people are not aware. They're not aware of what's being done to us. And so you've got people who, ask us, what are you guys talking about? We're not living in a dictatorship. Because they haven't seen the actual oppression yet, they're not seeing all the infrastructure being put in place, all the legal infrastructure, all the physical infrastructure is being built right now. They don't see it. And much like a lot of Germans, you look back at, there was a good book out called, I think it was They Thought They Were Free, talking about even after the war, there's still Germans who thought that Hitler was a great guy. He built the Autobahn, and all the good stuff he did. And they
the trains are running on time. Yeah.
So this is where we're at. But so I don't like to sugarcoat it too much and say, it could be just like East Germany. We could have a mass stand down, or like in Tunisia where the dictator, same kind of thing. The military refused to support him, and he had to flee the country. That's possible. I don't think it's likely. Just looking at the trajectory of our history, I don't think it's likely. I think we're going to have to go through some hard times first.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, as you were talking here, John from California writes, you wanted me to tell you that, and I know John, he's a great guy, that he for the last several weeks apparently, or months, that he's been putting on police cruiser windshields or handing to first responders the Oath Keeper website address, in paper form, that every chance he gets to spread the word about your website. But he asked, what efforts or PR is the Oath Keepers organization? What are you doing to initiate, to inform civilians about the dangers of NDAA. Are you in fact doing that? And you did cover part of that.
Yeah.
And how can our audience support your efforts?
Well, we did a series of billboards outside of military bases across the country, and also outside the Pentagon, down in the metro, in the D.C. metro, outside the Pentagon station, about detention of American citizens and how the NDAA is unconstitutional. And I helped author some resolutions to be passed by town and county governments resolutions against the NDAA being enforced in the counties. So I think one of the best things you can do is there's a website called the Intolerable Acts, where I wrote, along with a couple other activists, wrote some resolutions that you can use. So go look up the Intolerable Acts website, and you can find the model legislation that you can take to your town council or your county government. And that's one of the best ways to educate them about this, is that, look, this is real. This is a statute passed by Congress that codifies what had already been done by the Bush administration and Obama. And Obama already has killed American citizens overseas and claims the legal authority to do so here at home. I mean, look at Holder's statement 2 years ago or a year ago, where he lied, actually, because it turns out they were planning on using military force domestically, but he made it sound like it's some kind of hypothetical that could never happen. But he went ahead and, in response to Rand Paul, a letter from him, he responded and said, well, yeah, if there's a repeat of a Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor or another 9/11, sure, we could use military force. But not telling you that the logic behind it is that under the laws of war, they can just declare you an enemy combatant and kill you. It's not only in response to some kind of catastrophic attack. It's the president just pointing his finger at you and saying, he is now an enemy, period, kill him. And that's what's been done overseas. And that's what they've already claimed the power to do here at home. This is where we're going. It's a collision course,
This
is crazy.
We
do speak out against the NDAA, absolutely.
Do you think, and we've got, and I just want to thank you, by the way, for spending your evening with us. This is absolutely tremendous. We do have people that want to talk with you. Can we open the phone lines? Yeah, okay, good. What we're going to do is we're going to take the top of the hour break now, and then we'll open the phone lines here. I do know that we've got some callers on hold. The phone number is 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. For those who'd like to speak to, folks, it's a great opportunity to speak to the founder and director of the Oath Keepers. Oathkeepers.org, fantastic. I think it's a great opportunity. So please make your
guest, Mr. Stuart Rhodes, founder of the Oath Keepers. His website is oathkeepers.org. We're going to be taking questions for the guests via our phone line at 661-244-9839. And Stuart, I want to thank you for your time tonight. It's been a great 2 hours, and looking forward to hearing what the listeners want to ask you. We're going to start off by going to a caller. Kevin, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Stuart Rhodes. What's on your mind tonight?
Good evening, guys. How are you guys doing?
Good. Doing fantastic.
Oh, it's Kevin in Houston, obviously. I had a question. Actually, I had two things. One, I just posted something to your Facebook page, what Obama said last week, and I guarantee when you two see what he said, you're not even gonna believe it. I can't believe that I just heard him say that. Second, for the guest,
what did he say?
Can you hear? This is what he said. He said this to only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign. He said, listen, this is what he said.
Affairs. That order and progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.
He says,
that's bizarre. What was the context of that comment?
He was talking in front of a large crowd. I sent you the link. It's unbelievable.
He's delusional. He sounds like Mussolini. He called the people
dumbed down. He said a dumbed-down population can only be controlled if they surrender their individual rights to the sovereign. He actually said that. Well, you'll see it. And my second thing was for your guest. Is he still on?
Oh, yeah. He's right here.
Oh, okay. I know, as part of the Oath Keepers, do you find that the Department of Homeland Security is probably going to be our worst enemy here in the coming months, if not a year? Especially now that all the government agencies, even I think the post office is now buying rounds of ammunition.
Well, I think DHS is like our version of the Gestapo. I mean, this is what happened with Germany, is the Gestapo had their tentacles down into every local police department and every agency in the government at every level. And that's what happened. That's what's happening in our country now, is DHS is putting its tentacles down into the local police department. But they're also doing it through what we talked about earlier, through all the freebies. You got the MRAPs that are given to these police departments for free. They only have to pay for shipping, I think, and that's about it. And they get free toys, and all those toys, of course, come with strings attached, which is the tacit consent that you will comply and participate when we come in to use that MRAP, in your guys. No such thing as a free lunch. So yeah, I think DHS is our Gestapo. I think that's actually a very accurate parallel.
Man,
thank you,
Kevin. Thank you, brother. And I just want to give Kevin a plug. Kevin is the engine, the man behind the new listening app for iPhones and for your Android devices, iPhones and Android devices for the Hagmann Report. Thank you, Kevin, and we'll be talking. I need to figure out how to put that on the website. Joe keeps messing me up.
I know. I'm going to make one for the Oath Keepers too. I'm going to join that organization. If anybody I've seen needs one, he does.
I'll tell you, fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, you guys have a great night.
Thanks, Kevin. And Stuart,
yes,
Kevin does great work. I got to tell you, that his company does great app work. Joe.
Yeah, great. Right, in fact, if you don't mind, put me in touch with him by email. That'd be great.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we just launched our app. They just launched our app for us last week, I believe, and it's a pretty neat thing. I haven't had an app before, but a lot of people have given some positive feedback on it, and you have your little glitches here and there, but those are getting worked out, and it's a fantastic thing.
Back to his question, I think their intent is to. I think the greatest weakness we have is an economic collapse and the unpreparedness of the American people. And what they'll do is they'll trigger a collapse, make it part of, like, say, they'll have the Chinese and the Russians dump the dollar in retaliation to, whether we're doing, whether the Balkans or somewhere else, and they'll use that as their Pearl Harbor. They'll say, well, the Chinese stab us in the back, dump the dollar as an economic warfare weapon, and here's what we have to do. We got to come together as a country, and we have to do all of these things, martial law, or a new currency based on the special drawing rights at the World Bank, or whatever it is that they force down our throats in response. But they make it sound like if you oppose it, you're a crazy person or you're aiding the enemy. And that's what I think is they're setting up, is that kind of emergency that's perceived once again as being triggered by an outside force. So rather than blaming the bankers who are responsible for destroying the dollar, they can blame the Chinese or the Russians or somebody else. And so that's what I think our greatest danger is. And in that, they'll have, in their wildest dreams, what they want to do is they want to use the U.S. military, just like during Katrina, where they come in and say, okay, this is a real emergency, in all this chaos of Americans killing each other and cannibalism or whatever's going on, we have to do this. And you have to go in and scrap the Constitution to save the country, destroy the village to save it. And I think that's what they're setting up. So I think ultimately what they really want is for the U.S. military to say yes and then go along. So I think that's why it's critically important for us to make sure that we remove that excuse. You've got to get squared away as a community so that you're not desperate and starving, and you are providing your own local security. So the military is more likely to look at that and go, hey, hold on, they don't need our help, they don't want our help. Why are you ordering me to go do this? It doesn't make any sense. So you've got to pull that back. And if you don't take care of it, there will be chaos and there will be a sense of emergency, and more of the guys in the military are going to go along with it. And, of course, they'll have the secret police, the DHS, running around picking up the troublemakers while they're at it.
Well, when you say troublemakers, guys like us with radio programs that are telling people, look,
oh, yeah.
okay, thanks. I should have known. All right.
Well, sure. I mean, look at the response after the rhetoric that's out there after the couple in Vegas who killed the 2 Las Vegas Metro cops. And it's all about, once again, it's like, oh, they were radicalized by the internet and crazy theories about bankers and all that kind of stuff. In other words, stuff that's absolutely true. But they're calling it crazy, insane. They weren't insane. They were insane as far as the opinions they expressed were accurate about what's going on in our country. You look at his website or his Facebook page, it was pretty much mainline, freedom movement stuff. Yeah, it wasn't really talking about aliens, but they were insane as far as their chosen response to
course of action. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I get that, and the demonization of people like us out there, and whether or not Alex Jones does a great job in providing a lot of information that the mainstream news won't cover. They're demonizing him all over the time. They're blaming him for the ills of society. I mean, the next school shooting, I wouldn't be surprised if they blame him for that, blame us for that, or I understand that mentality, and you're absolutely correct in this. But like Katrina, the one thing that struck me, and I still have a problem with, even to this day, and then we'll get back to calls, is the police going on dry land, not touched by the storm, these mansion-like homes, perhaps that's a misperception, and taking, the guns out of those homes. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And I guess my question is, at this point, knowing what we know today, how would you, Stuart Rhodes, respond to that, or how should we, Hagmann, or the listeners more importantly, the listeners to the program, respond to the knock at the door? Hey, we're here for your guns. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's an individual choice. I mean, I hate to try to duck it like that, but it is an individual choice. And I know guys who, like I said earlier, they've already made their mind up that they're not going to get them, And so some guys they won't be there, Not only will their firearms not be there, but they won't be there when knocks at the door start to happen. They're going to be gone, and they're not going to wait. And once the raids begin, a lot of these guys are not going to wait for the secret police to come to their door. They're going to be going out hunting for the secret police. So it's going to be, a wide spectrum of responses. But I think Katrina was kind of like Waco. When Waco hit, and after that, people looked at that and said, okay, no more free Wacos, no more. It's not going to happen like that again. And then you get responses like Bundy Ranch. I think much the same way about Katrina. There was gun confiscation there. You had people in the military who complied with those orders and cops, and you had civilians citizens who submitted to it. But I think the attitude among a lot of Americans has hardened since then. And the same goes for the assault weapons ban. When it expired, it was rightly perceived as being an absurd and insulting violation of our basic rights that a lot of us have just decided we're not going to comply with that anymore. We're not. And I'm one of those people. I'm not going to do it. They can pass whatever law they want. Go right ahead.
Yep.
But I'm not going to make it easy on them either. And the same goes for a lot of other guys. You're not going to find contraband in my home, so don't even bother looking for it. It's not there. If I decide someday to own something that's illegal, it won't be here. So same goes for a lot of people. And so the spectrum's going to be across the spectrum. Some guys will be like, you're going to get some old Vietnam vet. He's got a bad heart, and he's not going to be running anywhere. So he's just done. He's just going to wait for them to come to his door, and he'll ambush them. That's the kind of thing that's going to happen. So, and whether you think it's the right course of action or not is not the point. It's going to happen. I don't have any control of what they do, and no one else does either. So, that's why our New York chapter put out a really good letter to the New York cops, and it was written by a retired New York State Police colonel, who is one of our guys, and also signed by that SF veteran I talked about earlier, who was NYPD, and a bunch of other New York cops. And they just said to their fellow police officers, guys, don't do this. Don't open this door, because it's a door to bloodshed, not just for us, but for you. And the message is Cuomo and the rest of these piece of crap politicians don't care about you. They'd love it when you get killed because then it's just more excuse for them to make more stupid laws. So they're not going to care about you. You're just cannon fodder. So you have to make a decision. And it's not, the way to avoid it is not for the people to submit. It's not going like that at all. The way to avoid the bloodshed is for the cops to refuse to do something unconstitutional, to refuse to violate our rights. That's the only way out. It's not going to be the New Yorkers bending the knee. That's not the way it's going to be avoided. The only way to avoid bloodshed is for the cops to step back and refuse to step through that doorway. If they step through that doorway, that's it. And there are plenty of guys out there, like I said, who are not going to be waiting for the knock at their door. They're going to go proactive. They're going to be out there hunting. And so the state police of New York are going to be, targeted, and they know that. We've had state police that we've talked to up there in New York who said they're not happy at all about Cuomo trying to use them as what they call his gray shirts. They know that if they do that, they're going to wind up dead. They know that, and they're not happy. And they're not mad at the veterans. They're mad at Cuomo. And so, it might be that Cuomo needs to watch his back, because it might not just be a veteran out there that wants to target him, but it might be one of his own police officers.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, let's move to another call, and if you want to call in, 661-244-9839. We're going to go to area code 970 next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Stuart Rhodes. What's on your mind tonight?
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Vicki. I live in Colorado, and I guess I just have a question about, I'm a single woman. I have very little income. I have no group of supporting people that will even listen. And, these things are pretty terrifying for me. I've been listening to your program for about 4 years, and I want to thank you all for what you're doing. But I was just wondering, Doug and Joe or Stuart, if you have any information about some resources for people like me where we can connect with other people. And I have done research, and I know that our sheriff here is, I don't know that he's an oath keeper, but he's a constitutional sheriff. And the idea that you had about taking the intolerable acts to your city council, that looked like one avenue I could start in. But I'm kind of stymied. I don't know where to begin to even get with people who think like I do. I have tried with a couple of different couples and it didn't work out. So,
well, I tell you what, I think the best advice I can give you is to throw a block party. Get to know your neighbors and then start a neighborhood watch. But I would recommend throwing a party first. Most Americans, the only time they ever look their neighbors in the eye is Halloween, right? You knock on the door and you trick-or-treat with your kids, and that's it. So, starting from scratch, I would throw a block party, invite all your neighbors, like a summertime party, get to know them over a hot dog and a beer, and without, talking about scary stuff, just get to know them. And you'll find out who retired cops are, who the veterans are, the retired doctor, nurse, all those, firefighter, all those useful skill sets. And then you chit-chat. And then later you go down to your local police department and you find the almost every police department has an officer who's assigned for neighborhood watches, and you go and coordinate with them. Then you go to your neighbors and say, hi. Your name is Nancy, right?
Vicki.
Vicki, I'm sorry, Vicki.
Vicky.
So you say, hey, I'm Vicki.
Right.
I'm the lady through the block. Oh, hi, Vicki. And hey, I'm starting, and you already know who they are. You already know who, like I said, the retired cop is and the veterans and all that. And so you're shopping for talent while you're talking to them at the barbecue, and then you go later on and you go recruit them. Say, hey, I'm starting a neighborhood watch. I'm coordinating with Officer Smith, and the sheriff is giving me these pamphlets. And here's the first question I have for you is, how do I reach you in case I see your front door kicked in? Or your house is on fire. What's your cell phone number I can reach you at? Blah, blah, blah. And here's my number in case you ever need anything. And that's how you start with your neighborhood watch. Very low level of commitment. You're not asking them to do anything ridiculous. You're just starting the process. And then you find out, like I said, you kind of shop for talent. You find out who the retired nurse or paramedic is, and you ask them, hey, if something happens, can I rely on you to help with emergency response? And then you go down and you can get free training through FEMA, right? The CERT program, Citizens Emergency Response Teams, or Community Emergency Response Teams. And you can even just use CERT. A lot of Americans, if you start talking to them about economic collapse or any of this kind of stuff, your eyes will glaze over. But if you say, hey, FEMA says to have a 72-hour bag, and FEMA offers free training called CERT, and I'm going to put together a class, and you're more likely to get them to jump on board. So I would soft sell it. Don't talk about scary stuff they can't handle. But just talk about the normal mundane stuff that happens. Look at Colorado. You had that huge flood, right? There's a good example in your recent history in your own state of why you want to have some preparedness. And FEMA recognized the need for self-aid. They know that there's no way they're going to get anywhere near a disaster like that in the first 72 hours. That's why they have the CERT program for self-aid, immediate self-aid. So you tell your neighbors, hey, FEMA says do this, let's do it. And you then don't look like a crazy person to them. You look like a rational person. So that's what I would recommend starting from scratch. Your neighborhood is more important. It's more important for you to find people in your own neighborhood who you can work with when crap hits the fan than it is for you to go find some like-minded, libertarian or whatever group in the broader community. Because what's going to count is who, like I said earlier, who's on your buddy team, who's on your fire team, your immediate team around you, because you might not be able to get out of your neighborhood. It might be, depending upon what happens, might be so bad that you got to deal with whatever's going on where you're at. You're stuck there. And another big thing you can do is also, like I said earlier, critical is communications, right? So you can go buy the cheap Bofang radios, like $35, $40 a piece on Amazon. Go buy 2, 3, or 4 of those, however many you can afford. Have them ready to go, and know the MERS frequencies you can use that are you don't even need a license for those. So they're ready to go. So when you have an emergency, you can go to that retired police officer, firefighter, or veteran, and say, hey, let's take care of security. Here's a radio to reach me. Even without any phone lines, no cell phone towers, whatever happens, you can communicate with each other. So you can provide, and if you get 2 or 3 people in your neighborhood who are willing to do this with you, you can provide the nucleus of the stuff that you're going to need, like a water purification system, even like a Sawyer handheld, water purifier. Things like that are hard to improvise under duress. Think about what FEMA sends in. What do they wind up dropping from a helicopter? Water, basic medicine, radios, blankets, stuff like that. So just, even within a limited budget, I would say commo's number 1. I would say medical's number 2, and right there with medical was clean water. You got to have clean water. So those are the things that you can do, but you really want to throw a block party and get to know your neighbors. And like I said, you're shopping for talent. You're talking to them, hey, what do you do? And, oh, yeah, you'll find out who has those skill sets. And then you just, depending upon what works best for you, figure it out. But I would recommend that you go through whatever official system is there, a neighborhood watch that's in conjunction with your sheriff's department, and then CERT. I think those are the 2 best ways to go.
All right. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much, and that was very good information.
It was.
Thank
you.
Thanks for the
Thank
call.
you very
Have
much.
a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too. And I would leave politics out of it. Who cares? Talk about disaster relief. And then, later on, you'll figure out, who's more awake and who's not. And when you start talking to guys, you'll figure out who's kind of gunny, who likes to go shooting. And then you go do a range day, go shoot for fun. And then before you know it, you're training.
That's right. And I've got to say that I've had better conversations with neighbors about mundane things, but yet you're able to discern where they're at, really by not addressing headlong or head-on certain issues. I understand that, and it was great advice, great practical advice.
And then one thing about someone who's been in the military, or someone who was a police officer or a nurse or EMT, things like that, is that they've made at least the basic psychological leap or realization that bad stuff can happen. There are some Americans who just refuse to even contemplate bad things happening. They're psychologically unable to deal with it. You know what I mean? So people like that, you're probably never going to get this, never
Oh,
going to
yeah.
reach them.
Within our own families. Yeah.
What's that? Oh, yeah, sure. They don't want to hear it. They get mad at you.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you know what? I'm sure you're not the most popular in your family when it comes to discussion like this. But we have to get used to this. But I think that's a great idea. Just without the pressure, just common conversation.
Right, you do without pressure. And then I really believe you should try to become part of your first responder community. Like my son just finished his EMT course, and I was in it too, and I had to quit to go down to Bundy Ranch. But my goal is to become an EMT here in my local community. And I've been a volunteer firefighter a few years back, and so get back into that. And I think that if you could become part of the existing first responder community, then you go talk to your neighbors, if you can do this, if you have the luxury of doing this in time. They see you in a very different light. If you walk up and say, "Hey, I'm Joe Blow with the local volunteer fire department. I'm also starting a neighborhood watch," that's a whole lot different than if you were to walk up and say, "I'm a conspiracy theorist," or whatever. And I'm worried about the New World Order, and I'm starting a militia. You're not going to get as many people responding. So, just be mindful of how they perceive you, and the fact that most Americans, in their head, you're legitimate if you're part of the system. If you're part of the first responder community or reserve police officer or whatever, they're more receptive to you, even saying the exact same thing, just because of the label they put on you. So I think that is a good way to go also.
Yeah, it's very telling about the American people, too. Moving on here, we're going to go to area code 520. 520, we're coming to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Stuart Rhodes.
All righty. There we go. You're up. You're up with Stuart Rhodes from oathkeepers.org. What's your question?
Hello?
That's you. Yeah, 520. Go ahead.
We'll come back to you, 520. We're going to go to 562. 562, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And I hear the show in the background. Gotta love
that. They forgot they're on hold, huh?
Yeah.
All right,
one more time. 727, we're coming to you. Hope you're ready to go. You're live with Stuart Rhodes on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. 727?
727 going once. All right. You there? Okay.
All right.
You want to go back to 520 real quick? I think that
520.
One more time. 520.
Hello?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hi.
You're up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You're loud and clear.
You can hear me?
Okay, one more time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hey, guys. I just wanted to say a couple things. I mean, truly, God bless you. God's called you to do this. And I think this Oathkeeper guy is spot on. I'm Sam in Tucson. And the only thing I'll say is that I hope that we just don't neglect the Latinos in our community. And if there's got to be a way to get the Whitestone Remnants Conference in Spanish, as well as a shout-out to all the Latinos out there, that we need to do the exact same thing, but to our other brothers who speak Spanish. Do you have any advice, Mr. Rhodes, of how to do that within the Latino community, like something like a block party? If you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that this is part of the divide and conquer of Americans is along racial lines as well. And I think that a lot of Americans, just like you wind up with a lot of Americans who start seeing all police as their enemy and all police start to see Americans as their enemy. I think it's the same thing being done to us along racial lines. You've got conservatives now who think that everybody who's Hispanic is automatically going to vote Democrat and is their enemy, and that's a huge mistake. I'm a quarter Mexican myself. My family came from Mexico. Sandoval is their last name, and most of my relatives are conservative, gun-owning Christians who vote Republican all the time. And so it's just we need to not buy into this divide and conquer along racial lines. I think it's critical. So yeah, I think it's very important for people to reach out to the Latino community, the Hispanic community as well. Yeah, absolutely. So, and the best thing you can do is be honest, Say, look, you left Mexico because you were getting away from corrupt government and a socialist system that does not work. It's not free. And look what's happening in the United States. The same thing's happening here. We don't want America to turn to Mexico or any other country like that in Central America. This country's special for a reason. And so, I think a lot of conservatives out there, like white conservatives, have really kind of bought into this. La Raza wants you to think that every Hispanic is your enemy. They love it when you guys, look at all brown people as your enemy. They want that. They want to drive them into their camp. And so I think it's important to realize that, most people from Mexico or any other place in South America, they're mostly very conservative Catholics. They agree with you on a lot of social issues, and they came here for freedom. And so I think it's real important to not buy into that divide and conquer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, and on a different note, Doug, again, Joe, y'all guys I'm one of those nameless intercessors, and y'all guys are doing a heck of a great job. And if you can get that information over to Michael Bennett, and there's got to be a way we got to get that in Spanish to help out. I think there was a really good move of God with everything that went down there at the White Stone Remnant Conference, but that needs to be in Spanish as well, please.
Sam, I'll talk to Mr. Bennett about that. We'll see what we can do. We really appreciate that. God bless you, my friend. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, and one more comment on that.
Man. God
everybody
bless.
Out there, all the listeners who are Hispanic and who are pro-freedom, you have an extra burden to step out. You really do. You got to reach out to that community because, the leftists really are trying to drive a wedge between the American people within our country. So it's very important to step up.
Aren't we seeing this in spades with respect to the illegal immigration or illegal alien drive? I don't know how else to describe it, but this human cattle drive from Central America and Mexico up through Mexico into our southern states, and you got Biden waving this. So he's like a school crossing guard. Bringing up the children and women. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah. Well, sure. If you oppose it, then it means you're a racist meanie. That's the tactic. So yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's
really
why
is.
I'm saying, the brown patriots need to be front and center. So it makes it much more difficult to paint them as a racist when they're friggin' brown guys. So
exactly.
That's why I love using my uncle in California. I love to bring him along and let him speak. He can speak straight to the Latinos and say, look, he grew up picking grapes. He grew up in the friggin' fields.
Wow.
So when the liberals show up and try to tell them that they're being oppressed and all this kind of crap, he can say, hey, man, you're turning our country into what we left. That's the message. And I think be hardcore about it. Just like you have Urban Manning up there in New York, a black patriot pastor who's calling Obama out, calling him the Mac Daddy. He just has no respect for him. Just call them what they are. They're Marxists, and they're destroying our country like they've destroyed other countries. So it's not about race.
And with me, more and more, it's not really much about political party either. It seems like
no, it's not.
Wow. I've just. From what I've seen following the events of 9/11, and even slightly before that, perhaps mid-95, looking back in hindsight, or mid-90s, I should say, I've seen such a hard left turn, so very overt that we're really fighting the fight. But having said that, I've got probably a page full of questions I'll never get to from the emailers. But one of the questions is, and I'm not sure if you answered this or not, but the percentage of active military, the percentage of returning veterans who are awake to what is going on, and also the percentage of, the third part of the same email is you've got people coming from a war zone, oftentimes being hired by police departments, and they've got a much different attitude about things. Percentage-wise, we're going to win or lose, I think, on the numbers here. What are you seeing percentage-wise?
Well, it depends. I think in your special warfare community, I think you tend to have a larger percentage who are awake and aware. I've talked to guys who are reinforced recon, scout snipers, or special forces or rangers, and it seems the higher up you get in the special warfare community, the larger the percentage of the guys in the unit are awake and aware of what's going on, especially with the economy. It's a huge one for them as they're looking at the shrinking cans in the stores and they're looking at the gas prices going up, and they're not stupid people. They're starting to see the big picture economically, and like you were saying, you're right. It's not just if only it were just the leftists who were destroying this country, it would be so much easier, right? But you got guys like John McCain and Lindsey Graham who are just as dangerous or even more dangerous on the so-called right. And I think a lot of returning veterans are starting to see that. They were in Afghanistan. They saw the poppy fields. They get a sense of the big picture now, and they're starting to wake up. And a lot of them are not happy about it. And so I think that
That's right.
If I had to put a number on it, I'd say in a lot of the special warfare units, I'd say at least half the guys are awake and aware. In fact, I had a current serving special warfare guy walk up to me at an event in Idaho, and he just said, "Hey, just want to let you know that in my unit, 75% are aware of what's going on, and in particular with the banking issue and the economy." He's one to let us know that they're switched on, and so I think that's a good sign. Among your veterans, I think your older veterans are, frankly and sad to say, the ones who are least aware. I think the more internet savvy they are, and the more recent returning veterans are more likely to be plugged in, and it's because of the internet, because they are seeing past and around the mainstream media and hearing things that the mainstream media will never cover. So I think that's in long run, I would say we would win in the long run. Given enough time, you would, just like with East Germany, you'd have an increasing awareness in the population of what's being done and how illegitimate it is, like a massive theft of the destruction of our dollar. But I think what's going to happen is that long before we reach that tipping point of that 90% understanding what's going on and they've been played, they'll pull the plug on the economy, create an emergency, an economic 9/11, and use that as a pretext. So that's the course we're on right now. How fast can we wake up our fellow Americans? And so that's why I think a critical population, for me anyway, is the guys with the guns, both the current serving and also the veterans, because the veterans have the skill sets and the training and the experience to be the leaders in their community, to make a huge difference and fill that vacuum, provide the local security and the local leadership so you don't have chaos and the pretext. And so you have a serious, incredible counterweight like we did at Bundy Ranch. You say, look, guys, it's not just trained versus untrained, it's trained versus trained. Take a step back,
Gotcha.
Mr. Rhodes, I have a question for you concerning the Internet. What do you see happening as situations tend to or seem to continue the way they are? Are we going to see them, I guess, the Internet kill switch is what people will call it. Do you think we'll see the Internet cut off at a strategic time when maybe raids are starting? Okay.
Yes. I think it's why it's critical for folks to develop your communications like through ham radio, the ability to communicate outside of the conventional web. So if they shut that down, frankly, with ham radio, you can pretty much do your own airwave, do the airwaves version of the Internet. They've got digital systems you can just type in, and they translate into Morse code, send it across the airwaves, and the other guy on the other side decodes it. What is that? That's an Internet through the air. So I encourage folks to go take your ham classes and get plugged in with your ham community and learn how to do that stuff. So, like I said, down at Bundy Ranch, I had to bring a ham operator from Montana, a general class ham who could talk to the world. He had to drive down from Montana. It's not because there's no hams in Nevada. We couldn't find a ham in Nevada who was willing to go do it. So you have to have, you patriots out there, you got to make sure that someone in your team, whether it's your family or your neighborhood watch, someone's got to go to ham class and get that general class ham license and learn how to talk to the world. You got to have that capability. So yes, I think we need to plan for a post-internet world where we can still communicate. Hey,
Carrie, they've worked before. Yes, right. I get that.
Hey, low-tech beats high-tech.
What's that?
Low-tech beats high-tech.
Before, as we're wrapping up the program here, let me ask you: Are you scheduled for any appearances, any speeches, any type of public appearances coming up?
I need to focus hard on our CPT program, and I really want to see us. Two big goals for Oath Keepers in the immediate future is to write a handbook for the current serving, so they understand what's going on and their duties, and so we can have, we can say we did all we could to educate them and ramp up our billboard campaign again outside of bases. And then the other big one is going to be a handbook for the veterans, and not that veterans are more important than non-veterans, but hey, Uncle Sam spent a lot of money training these people, and they've got duties and responsibilities. So we're going to put a handbook out for them so they can understand how best to utilize that training in their community and get ready. That and I really believe Americans need to start thinking about food storage as the number one priority. You got to have a strategic food reserve in your community. That means, bulk purchases of rice and beans and wheat. Think in terms of that. Not just, it's cool to have, like you were talking about earlier, one of your advertisers is selling, survival foods that are, protein. That's a good point. A lot of these programs are heavy on grains and whatnot and don't have much protein. But you also need to have extra rice and beans for your neighbors. So think about it as part of your security is not just you having food, but also storing away some cheap food for your neighbors so they're not starving to death. So, we're going to be really focused on our CPT program.
I remember a Twilight Zone episode, and I remember this when I was younger, watching this, and it's scaring me. It was about a neighbor
one?
The bunker one, yes, and the neighbors breaking it down, and much like today, and I think there was an incident in Kentucky or something. A storm went through, and somebody had a generator. None of the other neighbors had a generator, and somebody sued the guy with the generator because they lost a bunch of food in a freezer, and what a mess, So, I kind of hate to be the only one on the block with a whole house generator and a basement of food and a fallout shelter or something of the equivalent,
Right. That's what I was telling later earlier. Have the extra radios to hand out to your neighbors, but then have some extra rice and beans to hand out too. That way, they can help you protect the neighborhood.
Absolutely, man. I'll tell you. Any last points as we close down our program for tonight? Anything that we missed that you think we should have covered that's important to you?
I don't think we're talking enough about sheriff posses, and I think. Among all the things you can do, aside from getting your neighborhood squared away, the neighborhood watch, I think electing a good sheriff who is willing to form a posse is really the most important thing you can do politically. I think it's far more important than who goes to Congress is who's your sheriff. And then when you get a good guy in there as a sheriff, it's a game changer, but you have to back him up. You can't just expect him to stand up for the Constitution without you standing next to him.
Right.
And that means a posse. Right. He's got to have a posse. So that's one big area we're going to focus on is raising posses with good sheriffs.
Define posse for me. You mean deputy sheriffs, or do you mean citizens that are trained in basic law enforcement?
A good example is Sheriff Arpaio down in Arizona. He has a 3,000-man posse. He's got people who are in his posse, different levels of training and skill. He's got folks who just start off, they just, wear an orange vest and with a flashlight redirect traffic from around an accident. But he also has, like, he has a search and rescue unit that's very well trained. And they're not just trained in search and rescue, but they also train with M4s. They're well armed. So it's basically his light infantry unit. So, it can go to the spectrum. What they are is volunteers, like a volunteer fire department, right? Unpaid volunteers who are trained under the command of, like in the case of the sheriff, it's the sheriff, they're under his command. And a sheriff can deputize people on the spot. But what I'm talking about is in advance having folks apply. He vets them through a training process, whatever level of training he requires, and as they go, he gives them more and more responsibility. And that's kind of how sheriffs are doing it across the country. There are sheriffs, like Sheriff Christopher, there in Delaware, has a posse with a lot of Oath Keepers on his posse. And so that's how they figure out, and you figure out if someone's not stable, you kick them off the posse. Or you put them over there, they answer the radio or whatever, if there's somebody you don't trust with a firearm. So that's up to the sheriff to figure out. And it could mean reserve deputies. It could be the same kind of thing where they go to some kind of an academy and become a reserve deputy. So it's really, dependent upon the needs of the sheriff and how it works in his county. But basically it's kind of like the law enforcement counterpart to a militia. A militia is a military function. The posse is a law enforcement function. It's made up of the people themselves.
Okay. And that's one thing here in our community. I think that we will press our sheriff, and make an inquiry and press our sheriff because I can see the value in that for a number of reasons.
To me, a wonderful way to do it would be to walk up to the sheriff and say, okay, here's the roster of the members of the local VFW. They have all agreed to serve as your posse. They all have training in their different specialties. They're ready to go,
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why not?
Very good. Absolutely. Mr. Rhodes, I want to just thank you very much for giving up your evening. I know that you're a busy man, very busy man, and you've given up your evening to be on our show. We want to thank you so much for that. I'll tell you, oathkeepers.org. Anyone can certainly help out your organization via donations. Let others know about Oath Keepers. Anything, and by the way, you've got a lot of good videos there. Of course, you were speaking about Oath Keepers and your interviews and such. Joining Oath Keepers, simple process. How do we do that?
There's a link on there. It says join, and you can join as an associate member if you're not prior service. It's military, police, and first responders, but then we also have an associate membership for those who just want to help out. And we don't treat you any differently. We're all in this together,
We're all in this together,
like I said, I really don't care if someone joins. What I really care about is that you go and knock on your neighbor's door and get to know them and then start working with them so that when the crap hits the fan, you can help each other. That's more important than being a card-carrying member of any organization.
Very good. Folks, you asked for solutions. We just provided you a big one via Oath Keepers, and a lot of good information is shared by Mr. Rhodes tonight. Mr. Rhodes, I want to thank you so much. Both Joe and I want to thank you for being part of our program tonight. You've touched a lot of people. I could tell by the emails. God bless you, my friend.
You too. Anytime. Let me know. I'll come back on anything you like. It was a very enjoyable interview.
All right, sir. God bless you. Thank you so very much. And that was Stuart Rhodes, the founding member, the founder of Oath Keepers, a constitutional attorney, very well spoken, and a lot of great information, wasn't it, Joe?
Very well spoken, yes, absolutely, and filled
very
with
good advice,
information, things to do, as you said, solutions. A lot of people ask for solutions, and there was a lot of information that would lead to solutions if people took the initiatives and they went well.
Exactly, and that's one thing I've noticed too. That this past weekend, I'll just end this very quickly here. This past weekend, I had taken a walk down my block, and there's how my street is. I live kind of in an out of the way area, and it's a street, and it kind of splits off into two. And talked to some people I've not talked to, even though I've lived in the same location for nearly 20 years. Have not talked to before. Have been long-time residents, And it's surprising when you just start talking to people, not about anything, not about the sky is falling or the economy is going down, but just talk to them. You get a lot of information about where they're at mentally. And the one conversation I had with a gentleman was pretty enlightening in terms of what he offered this up without me even saying anything. He's just said that essentially things are not as serene as they seem. And we were talking about the area being quiet, and then, well, you know how one thing leads to another. But very interesting comments, and you can pick up on those, folks. You can pick up on the comments by others, and certainly go for. Well, you'll know what to do. I really believe you'll know what to say and how to say it. But yeah, neighborhood watches. Get to know your veterans, and think of others when you're preparing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Absolutely. Tomorrow we'll be having Stan Dale on the show.
That's right. And then Wednesday, of course, V and W, the Financial Insider and the Intelligence Insider.
And we have a guests lined up for Thursday.
That's correct. Absolutely. And very enjoyable tonight. Very good program. I hope everyone, as I said earlier, has enjoyed their Father's Day. By the way, I just got a note. Keep Tosh Plumley in your thoughts and prayers. Tosh Plumley is the CIA. This is part of the CIA program, and he was on our program a couple of times. Apparently, he's suffering some form of harassment or maybe even a little bit more than harassment, some sort of dangerous situation. So keep Tosh in your prayers. I hope I didn't speak out of school on that.
No, and this out of Israel National News: U.S. quietly releases more military prisoners in Afghanistan. And it says over a dozen detainees were returned from a small U.S. military prison in Afghanistan. This from defense officials from last Thursday. In another controversial prisoner release set to tone down the U.S.'s war on terror, President Obama, to letters of Congress, Thursday informed U.S. lawmakers that 38 non-Afghan prisoners remained at the Parwan Detention Center outside of Kabul, down from about 50 a month ago. And from a defense official speaking on the condition of anonymity, they told Reuters that Kuwait and 10 Palestinian protesters were sent back to their respective home countries at the end of May.
Folks, on CanadaFreePress.com and HomelandSecurityUS.com, my latest published today concerning ISIS, the situation in Iraq, the bigger picture. And I think that we have to take a look at the bigger picture because we're looking at a situation that they started, this particular government, the Western Intelligence Agency, started to go after Assad. They're not stopping. They're just opening up a different front. Take a look at the vehicles that they're using. They're U.S. vehicles. They're complements of Western Intelligence, CIA, and ISIS. And again, don't just think about that name, the acronym. I don't believe in coincidences, especially when it comes to things like that. Folks,
thank you for listening.
Great night. Yep.
It's been fantastic. You guys stay safe until tomorrow. We'll see you back here at 8 p.m. Once again, Stuart Rhodes from oathkeepers.org was our guest. A fantastic interview. If you got joined us late, go back and listen from the beginning. He was on the whole show, with very gracious with his time and information. And once again, thank you to Stuart Rhodes. Everybody have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good night.